guy is an absolutely insane S-rank hunter. His name is Akabane Maguru, and he reached the pinnacle of power even while belonging to the jobless class. His one big life goal was simple: to use the ultimate reward to eradicate every single dungeon in the world. He joined the guild to fight alongside comrades, believing that this way he could protect his sister and make it out of this mission alive. At least that's what we thought. The world is cruel to the naive. I want to see these people pay for this. I can't take it anymore. Exactly 5 days before the truth was revealed, in a colossal celestial dungeon floating right above Tokyo, Maguru proved exactly why he was a living legend. Drawing his sword straight from a dimensional portal, he shot like lightning toward a colossal giant snake, using the momentum of his charge to scale the beast's own body. Face to face with the monster, he focused an infinite purple lightning magic into the palm of his hand and unleashed a devastating blast, completely destroying the creature in a single strike. The entire guild celebrated this absurd feat, and his beloved sister Kana rushed over to give him the emotional support he needed. All of Meguru's insane strength came from a promise forged in blood 3 years prior. Back then, his parents sacrificed themselves fighting a horde of wild wolves so he could escape. Obeying his father's final shout and his mother's tears, he grabbed Kana's hand and ran, taking on the responsibility to protect her whatever the cost. He ran far, and from that day on, he felt he would never be alone, for he had the responsibility to protect her. This was the reason he fought, and he thanked his guild for their excellent work. They set up camp and began discussing the monsters that had stopped appearing on the lower floors. No matter how many times he ate, the hunter found the supplies unpalatable. However, Meguru saw the positive side in the richness of nutrients. He knew that once they finished the dungeon, they wouldn't have to live that way anymore. When the battles ended, their wishes would be granted. His wish, as a hunter, was to eradicate the world's dungeons once and for all. The members of his guild listened to his objective attentively. 2 weeks later, the guild finally reached the highest floor of the dungeon, encountering the boss, a massive and terrifying red dragon. The guild bravely confronted it as it unleashed its fire breath. Our hero strategically guided them to surround the creature. The members obeyed and began coordinated attacks. Maguru noticed that the dragon had its guard down, losing scales. Focusing attacks on that vulnerable spot, he wielded his sword. However, he was surprised by a tail whip from the dragon that sent him flying. His sister ran to him and healed him immediately. Maguru was on the verge of elimination this time and thanked her for the healing. He asked the rear guard to focus on the dragon's eyes, while the rest continued attacking its neck. After 2 weeks of intense combat, he finally understood the true meaning of fighting as a team. Maguru, who had never before had companions he could fully trust, now saw everyone fighting alongside him. He had never placed his complete trust in anyone other than Kana, but at that moment, he entrusted them with his very life. The fusion of his sword and magic, a skill only an unemployed individual like him could achieve, was his greatest weapon. Concentrating a vast amount of energy into his sword, which became enveloped in lightning, he charged his ultimate attack, delivering the final blow to the dragon's neck, which finally seemed defeated. However, just as Maguru believed they had finally succeeded and that the world would find peace, something drastically changed. A sword pierced his chest, and Kana, his sister, couldn't stop it. Stunned, he wondered why, and the red-bearded man revealed the cruel truth. They were never friends. After all, their viewpoints were irreconcilable, and he had betrayed Maguru. While the protagonist wished to eradicate all dungeons, the others vehemently disagreed, as they didn't want to erase the status they had built for themselves. Leaving Maguru agonizing on the ground, the traitor explained that by protecting the world, S-rank hunters gained great prestige in society. From the moment Maguru expressed his desire to end the dungeons, they decided they should end him. Maguru understood their anger, but couldn't comprehend why they had harmed Kana. The motivation, according to them, was to prevent her from hindering their plans. Outraged and filled with deep hatred for his sister's elimination for such a stupid reason, Maguru heard the hunters mock his idea of a meaningless perfect world. The red-bearded man concluded, saying that this was what happened when the unemployed met the heroes. On his deathbed, Maguru knew he had chosen the job considered the weakest of all. Even though he was seen as unemployed, he had strived harder than anyone and had become incredibly strong. He never imagined he would be ridiculed in his final moments. Feeling like a fool for having trusted his companions, he swore he would never forgive them for eliminating Kana. He promised himself that he would strike down every single one of those who betrayed him. All this rage, paradoxically, emerged as a glimmer of hope, and suddenly, Maguru woke up. Waking up in a bed, he wondered if everything he had experienced had been just a dream. Crying, he remembered every detail, certain that it had all been real. He noticed he was in a hospital when a nurse appeared to do his checkup. Confused, he realized he had woken up in the body of a man named Izumi. His doctor recommended he take it easy for the next week. Meguru questioned why he was in the hospital and noticed his wounds had been healed. He wondered why all of this was happening and why he was a different person. Then, to his immense relief, he saw Kana, who called him Meguru, his original name. He was extremely happy to find his sister and for her to recognize him. Kana explained that after they were eliminated, they were reincarnated into bodies hundreds of years later. Although Kana looked exactly the same, she had no memories of her past life. In contrast, Meguru had the memories, but his appearance was completely different from before. The original owner of the body was Izumi Meguru, an unemployed hunter, just as he had been. Meguru possessed fragments of the original body owner's life memories. Kana found it sad that he had lost his memories and questioned what had happened. She explained that his wounds didn't match the monster attacks he had suffered, which made her very worried. Meguru apologized to her, and Kana, happy that he was well, promised to visit him later. Based on the body's memories and what Kana had told him, Meguru understood the new reality. After clearing the Sky Dungeon, Matsubara and the other 5 heroes made a wish to become masters. Each of them now commanded their own dungeon and had become an enemy of humanity. Only Meguru and Kana desired a world of peace. The 6 heroes gained eternal life by becoming dungeon masters, which kept them alive even hundreds of years after the event. Consumed by deep hatred, Meguru swore he would never forgive them. A few days later, Meguru questioned the best way to reach the dungeons. His sister found it absurd that he wanted to go to a dungeon right after leaving the hospital. However, after everything that had happened, he wanted to become strong as quickly as possible, as eliminating the 6 heroes, who were now dungeon masters, couldn't be done with ordinary strength. Kana asked him to stop and tried to understand why he was pushing himself so hard. Meguru explained that despite having the reputation of being unemployed, and things not having changed from one life to another, unemployment being a horrible job that consists of having no skills with magic and sword, he had his own way of doing things. Apologizing to his sister, he stated that there was an unemployed method. Before Meguru could explain his method, someone appeared surprised that he was alive. 2 people called him resilient, and Kana asked if Meguru knew them. He replied that he did, remembering that those 2 were the ones who had hospitalized the previous body's owner. The previous body's owner had also been betrayed in a dungeon. One of the hunters who had hospitalized Meguru's former body owner asked him not to say anything, as he still had enough money to live a little longer. In gratitude for lending him the body, Meguru promised to avenge the former owner. However, when Meguru asked them for a favor, the 2 psychotic hunters prepared to attack him again. One of the hunters, a rank D with enormous arms, charged at Meguru in a fit of rage. Throwing a punch, he declared that a rank F hunter would never defeat him. In response, Meguru landed a punch before his enemy, surprising him with his brutal strength. As the first hunter fell to the ground, the other drew a knife, refusing to be made a fool of, and lunged at Meguru with the intent to eliminate him. At that moment, Meguru recognized that his current body was considerably weaker than his previous one. Still, using his vast experience, he managed to deal with the weaker opponent and grabbed the dagger. With surprising ease, he ripped the weapon from the enemy's hands and broke the blade's steel with his fingers. At that moment, the 2 enemies, overcome by fear, fled. Kana, shocked, questioned when Meguru had become so strong. She felt as if her brother was a completely different person, both in strength and demeanor. Meguru, in turn, explained that although he was physically weaker, he was now capable of casting difficult spells with his bare hands. He was certain that if he regained his attributes, he would achieve his revenge. For his attributes to grow properly, he intended to clear various dungeons scattered across the world. Before defeating the 6 heroes, he needed to make sure to explore several dungeons. Upon arriving at a rank E dungeon, Meguru apologized to the guild hunters who were waiting for him. It was a higher level dungeon than his own, as he was only a rank F adventurer. With all members gathered, they entered the dungeon, including Kana and Meguru. The hunters, noticing Meguru and Kana's attributes and level, cast malicious glances at them. After passing through the portal and arriving in a cave, they decided to discuss the attack plan. The group leader, a man with a scar over his eye, picked up a stalactite and declared that the final attack bonus would be his and his friends. Demonstrating strength and arrogance, he asked if anyone would oppose it. As the leader prepared to discuss the vanguard formation, Meguru interrupted him, questioning whether the experience shouldn't be divided among the entire team. Kana disliked Meguru's attitude of confronting unknown hunters, but he insisted that he also wanted bonuses. The leader retorted, saying that if he, as the leader, didn't land the final blow, things could become dangerous. He mocked Meguru for not knowing this, and for being a dumb rank F. Our hero replied that everything would be fine if they fought carefully, which infuriated the guild leader. The leader struck with his sword, not intending to eliminate Meguru, but threatening him at the same instant. Pointing the sword, he said that Meguru, being a low-level unemployed person, shouldn't push his luck. The leader's right-hand man intervened, stating that in a dungeon, the boss's words were absolute. In his view, the weaker ones should stay quiet, and he placed a hand on Meguru's shoulder in a threatening manner. He activated strange purple flames, but was promptly interrupted by the other guild members. A boy with glasses asked Meguru to obey them, even if he wanted to gain experience. Meguru then realized that this was not a good place to argue or fight. The leader, with the enormous sword on his back, told him to watch his words. Meguru realized that the two hunters, the leader and his right-hand man, were colluding to steal all the treasures and experience from the dungeon. The loots, he noticed, were different from the rewards offered by the Hunters Association. They were raw materials gathered in the dungeons, and Meguru concluded that these people were excessively greedy. At that moment, the group encountered wild and furious boars at the back of the cave. The group leader ordered his subordinates to attack the monsters. The hunters, weak and clumsy, advanced and began attacking the enemies. Meanwhile, the leader, the hunter with the scar over his eye, waited for the right moment to finish the combat and secure the loot. His friend, in turn, used fire magic to deliver the final blows. Meguru watched the scene in dismay until a wild boar charged furiously towards him. In response, he used magic from the palm of his hands while leaping. As he leaped over the boar, he unleashed the magic directly from his palm. The magic not only defeated the boar attacking him, but also struck and eliminated several others, leaving the guild leader shocked by such immense power. However, one of the boars, still alive, attacked the greedy leader, wounding him in the stomach. Just then, the monster that attacked the leader was eliminated by Meguru's magic. Standing before him, Meguru ordered him to pick up his own loot, and the leader, reluctantly, obeyed. The leader, still proud, claimed he would have survived even without the help of the jobless one. Meguru then suggested that if the leader didn't trust his own abilities, he should leave the group. Completely demoralized, the leader tried to downplay the incident, saying it was just an occasional event. The mission continued, but the leader was visibly unsettled by Meguru's presence and actions. In the final boss room, located in the deepest part of the dungeon, the leader, with his arrogant demeanor, began to scheme. He ordered Meguru to stay put, while the rest of the group, along with his comrade, would accompany him. Meguru didn't understand what the leader was plotting, but the scarred hunter, his right-hand man, insisted that he obey. The leader assured Meguru that he shouldn't worry, as he himself would quickly defeat the final boss. And, with disdain, he stated that inferior beings like Meguru should merely observe and learn. Despite being expressly ordered to stay put, Kana and Meguru decided to move forward. Upon reaching the final boss room, they were met with a repulsive sight. A massive boar-like creature with sharp tusks and multiple eyes was voraciously feeding on living beings. The guild leader and his companion, driven by greed and the promise of substantial payment for defeating the monster, launched their attack. Displaying their sword and magic skills, they tried to demonstrate their strength to the rest of the team and to Meguru and Kana, who had disobeyed orders. However, their display of power was short-lived. Through the smoke of their fire magic, they realized the creature was still alive. The diabolical being, with a cruel smile, delivered a devastating blow that tore off one of the guild leader's arms, leaving him in complete shock. Next, the boar boss unleashed a scorching magic that burned the group leader's companion. With his body engulfed in flames, he screamed in pain as both were seized by the monster, which prepared to devour them. Paralyzed by terror, they couldn't react, and in moments became food for the colossal creature. Before succumbing, the greedy leader cried and begged for his life, but it was all in vain. The guild, horrified, watched the scene unfold. Meguru, the protagonist, recalled how unusually strong the dungeon monsters had been. The final boss, in particular, didn't fit the association's classification criteria, leading him to conclude that it was a disguised dungeon, thus explaining the creature's immense strength. Without hesitation, he and Kana prepared for an arduous battle. While the other terrified guild members had no intention of fighting, Meguru drew his sword and declared he would take down the creature. The others, F-rank hunters, were shocked, as Meguru knew that, being a disguised dungeon, the creature was C-rank, not E. He ordered all guild members to stay quiet while he initiated the fight. His body surged with energy as he charged at high speed towards the monster. Telling himself he would never trust anyone again, Meguru began to attack the creature alone, delivering several sword strikes at once. After the slashing attacks, he used freezing magic from the palm of his hand, which, upon hitting the disgusting boar, caused considerable damage. However, the monster, with its tusks and multiple eyes, began began to conjure magic in response. It cast the spell at Meguru, who dodged it effortlessly and retaliated with another enchantment. When his magic struck the monster, it caused a large explosion, but didn't inflict as much damage as expected. Meguru knew he couldn't defeat the diabolical being in a single blow with his current stats. Realizing there was nothing more to be done that way, he conjured another spell and dodged the boar's tusks. He leaped to avoid a destructive blow, aware that he needed to stop the creature's movements. Observing the scene from above, Meguru wielded his sword and slashed the boar's knee, making it shriek in pain. Next, he swiftly moved to the other knee, delivering another cut that brought the monster crashing to the ground. After immobilizing the boar, he understood that the magic he had released earlier had served to propel him. He used magic downwards again, and the propulsion sent him flying, surpassing the monster's height. Reaching close to the cave ceiling, he conjured a spell and launched it at the stalactites. The large ice spikes rained down on the malevolent boar's head, completely destroying the monster and embedding its head into its own body. When Meguru brought down the creature, fulfilling his promise, the entire guild was surprised. A very strong blue light appeared, and they headed towards its source. At that moment, all of Meguru's attributes began to increase by 5 points. Experience was indeed the greatest advantage for an unemployed person. Kana, his sister, realized that he was not the same as before. Meguru was startled when she noticed he was a different person in that body. The girl asked him not to deceive her, as there was no way he could have become stronger in such a short time. Therefore, she was certain he had been hiding his true strength all along, questioning why he would do so if they were friends. Our hero, realizing she hadn't uncovered his deepest secret, patted her head, saying he had been training in secret all that time because he wanted to protect her. Meguru swore to himself that he would never let what happened in his past life happen again. Then, he told them to leave the dungeon and inform the Hunter Association. They arrived at the Hunter Association's base in Shinjuku. The secretary couldn't believe that a C-rank dungeon boss had been defeated by an unemployed person, especially since this boss had eliminated 2 D-rank adventurers. However, Kana asserted that she had seen everything with her own eyes. The secretary found the story absurd, suggesting that the 2 adventurers had been stabbed in the back after defeating the boss. He realized that an unemployed person defeating a boss alone was something the association did not look favorably upon. Kana shouted that they would never do such a thing, and demanded they confirm the story. Izumi Meguru explained that the hunters, by letting their guard down for a second in the dungeon, had perished. Sincerely, he expressed his opinion that the secretaries were treating the deaths of the 2 in a disparaging manner. Embarrassed, the secretaries promptly apologized, stating that their words were not intended that way. Meguru then challenged them to recall the effort the hunters had put in to defeat the monster should they still doubt his version. Afterward, Izumi Meguru left the premises and encountered the head of the Hunter Association. The branch chief observed the young man with peculiar intensity, while the secretary tried to get his attention. Although the chief seemed to recognize Izumi, Izumi himself wondered who that man was. Kana, for her part, questioned if it was all right to have left the branch in such a manner, but Izumi didn't care about gaining credit for his deeds. At that moment, Kana realized he was still the same Izumi Meguru as before, recalling her memories of when they lived in nearby houses, being neighbors. Later, lying in his bed, Izumi fiddled with a modern smartphone, noticing how much technology had evolved since his time. Suddenly, he received an urgent news notification. Matsubara was coming to Japan. Recalling the man's face, Izumi felt a growing rage, though he claimed to be very excited just thinking they would reunite soon. Meanwhile, in China, Matsubara received news that the other masters were slowing down. After hundreds of years, he felt that the time had finally come. His worried butler asked him to be extremely careful before leaving the room, but Matsubara, with excessive confidence, assured him that nothing would happen. Matsubara, one of the 6 heroes, then assured his butler that he would take care of everything while he was absent. Hundreds of years prior, Matsubara had become the manager of an S-rank dungeon, and with his power, conquered all of China. Now, to further expand his territory, he needed Japan, before the other heroes could defeat him and claim what belonged to him. Already in his car, he ordered his troops to be gathered immediately, threatening his subordinate should he fail the task. Back at the Hunter Association, Izumi Meguru was trying to recruit new members, but faced great difficulty. His F rank and the fact that he was unemployed weighed heavily on the recruitment process. As an adventurer, he had no choice but to clear dungeons to gain more status, and to find a dungeon, no matter how difficult, he first needed to rise above F rank. Kana then questioned how he would manage to rank up if he couldn't undertake dungeon-clearing missions. While his sister complained about the hypocrisy, the branch chief appeared. Hearing their complaints, the branch chief showed understanding and apologized for his employees' rudeness. He then informed Izumi that he could take a special test to increase his level. He explained that each month, a hunter skill examination was held in underground facilities, allowing hunters to easily rank up upon success. Despite it being a very difficult test, the chief suggested that there was no harm in Maguru trying, because if he failed, he could retake it or fulfill the requirements to rank up normally. Seeing that, although the pass rate was low, there were no disadvantages in trying, Izumi decided to accept. His employee then questioned the chief about why he had recommended that special examination, as no one had ever passed it before. In response, the chief declared that Izumi Maguru could be the first person to pass the test. 3 days later, Izumi Maguru and other hunters headed to the association's underground facility. The test seemed simple. It involved defeating monsters that would appear in the room. These monsters, created by the mana from dungeon magic stones, would feel pain if hit, but would not die even from a fatal blow. If the hunters successfully defeated them, the monster would turn to dust and vanish. After finishing the explanation, the instructor asked who would like to go first. At that moment, a heavily armored knight stepped forward to be the first. As he approached the magic stone, a giant blue snake emerged from it. The knight let out a shout and delivered a charged blow with his sword, confident of victory. However, the monster's scales were incredibly tough, and the sword failed to penetrate them. Then, in a single swift movement, the giant snake lunged and crushed the knight against the wall. The other hunters were shocked by the defeat of one of the strongest warriors present, deeming victory impossible, as it was a rank A monster. Immediately after, the instructor, who was blind, asked if there were any more candidates, and Izumi Maguru raised his hand. To the surprise of all the adventurers and his sister Kana, he entered the combat room. Ready with his weapon in hand, he faced a white lion and immediately charged at it. At the same instant, the creature prepared a fireball inside its mouth. Maguru dodged the fiery blast, and as he landed on the ground, a claw attack came his way. He responded with extreme speed, blocking the giant lion's fangs with his sword, aware that even a scratch would mean the end of the test, as the monster was incredibly strong and fast. However, Izumi Maguru knew exactly how to handle the situation and, without hesitation, lunged with his sword. After delivering a precise cut to the beast's enormous paw, the enraged lion launched another fiery blast towards Izumi. Maguru, in turn, activated an ocular ability that allowed him to see his opponent's weak points. Since he had conquered the previous dungeon, his attributes had increased considerably, allowing him to perform even more impressive feats with his body. With his weapon, he delivered several slashes at the fire magic, dissipating it with remarkable ease. Thanks to the increase in his magical speed, Maguru could now move anywhere he wished with surprising agility. While the immense lion prepared another fireball in its mouth, Maguru concentrated purple magic in the palm of his hand. This was possible due to a peculiar ability of his unemployed class. The more his stats increased, the more omnipotent he became. Thus, he made the magic in his hand collide head-on with the one being launched by the lion, defeating it in an instant. A large magical explosion erupted from the impact, and Izumi Maguru emerged victorious from the test. Minutes later, he received his hunter card. Now with Ranky Kana, his sister, was overflowing with happiness that he had passed the special exam. After all, Maguru had been the first and only one to be approved. Our protagonist, however, had no idea that no one else had been approved, falling for the lie told by the branch chief. Suddenly, men in suits and dark glasses approached, recognized Izumi Maguru, and instructed him to accompany them. Maguru stated he had never seen those men before. Frightened, Kana asked him to return quickly, visibly worried. To assure her he would return as soon as possible, the protagonist handed her a talisman. His sister, reluctant to accept the situation, cried out in fear for him not to go. After a mysterious car ride, they arrived at a suspicious-looking underground location. Then, they stopped in front of a door which, upon opening, revealed Izumi asking why that person had brought him there. An old man with a long beard and hair laughed, stating that the reason didn't matter all that much. Next, he showed a briefcase full of money, revealing his intention to sponsor our protagonist. The old man's men had seen him at the special test, and Maguru could see millions of yen there. Immediately after, the old man offered 100 million per month. His proposal was for Izumi to become something like his bodyguard. Explaining further, the old man said they represented a large-scale organization. They performed all kinds of services, and the protagonist soon understood that the old man would not reveal more details until he accepted the money. In order to carry out his revenge against the 6 heroes, Maguru needed time and, above all, money. He needed money more than anything, but but he didn't want his actions controlled by anyone. Our hero turned his back, stating that he could not accept the sponsorship at that moment. However, the door remained locked, and the henchman announced that since he hadn't accepted the proposal, he wouldn't leave there alive. One of the old man's subordinates lunged forward with a punch that, to Izumi Meguru, seemed incredibly slow. However, to his surprise, the punch landed squarely on his stomach, leaving him shocked by its unexpected force and accuracy. The subordinate explained that the room had a reduced amount of oxygen. He elaborated that the previous corridor had an air supply, but this specific environment did not. He further stated that no one would have enough air there unless they possessed a magical golden ring. As this was a magical tool, the protagonist finally understood why they had brought him to that place. He stood up, recognizing that he had fallen into a trap. Nevertheless, he declared that they had only slightly reduced his speed, and he could still fight. His enemy called him a stubborn idiot who didn't know when to quit, but this time, the protagonist managed to land a full, massive punch on his opponent's face. This left everyone shocked, and one of the thugs grabbed a dagger to attack Meguru. With his senses dulled, the protagonist chose not to get close, delivering a kick to the man with the knife. Fighting and using his mind to strategize, he finished off the enemy with a punch right after the kick. The last remaining thugs advanced on Izumi all at once. As a result, the protagonist defeated all three of them in a matter of seconds. Even if they were weak, the main thug hadn't expected him to defeat 6 opponents in total. In any case, they were no match for him, who took off his shirt, revealing a gigantic physique. Entering a berserk rage, he grabbed an axe, and several veins bulged on his body. He struck the ground with his giant axe, and the protagonist dodged to the side. Meguru recognized that the berserker class reduced intelligence and speed in exchange for a massive increase in strength. He had seen a single, extremely powerful berserker in his past life, and in this case, he felt pity for the target. Our hero used the wall to bounce off and evade the enemy's strong yet predictable blows. A berserker's weakness, he knew, was their extremely low magic resistance. They were no match for the unemployed, who increased mobility and magical attack power. Meguru then unleashed an extremely powerful burst of magic at the reddened enemy. Upon hitting his body, it caused immense damage, making the monster fall to the ground. The only downside was the amount of mana he expended. Then the old man congratulated him, stating that he had already expected such a performance from such an interesting hunter. Even though he had exceeded his expectations, the protagonist, tired of the situation, ordered him to open the door immediately. Contrary to Meguru's expectation, the strange old man still did not open the door. Instead, he revealed that Izumi had some weaknesses, showing him a camera where Kana appeared gagged. Meguru immediately understood that they had followed his sister to her house, realizing that the old man's subordinates, many of them impulsive, had done all the dirty work. Meguru felt intense fury upon seeing the old man's thugs with his sister, who was desperately screaming for help. The sight of the little girl pleading for help left him deeply shaken and unsure how to react. The subordinates, in turn, declared that they had received orders from their boss to do as they pleased, and therefore, they would make the most of Kana's presence. As they tried to take advantage of her, the girl screamed, asking them to stop. However, Kana quickly activated a magic circle, pushing the aggressors away and managing to free herself from her restraints. She then attacked the enemies, noticing the presence of her brother's amulet. At that instant, she understood that Meguru Izumi had saved her life. The old man, surprised, questioned what had happened upon seeing the girl free herself and defeat his thugs. He revealed that he had already anticipated such a situation, creating an amulet from the loot of a disguised dungeon. He explained that this magical item, forged with special stones, could be activated remotely, as he had developed a device that would be triggered immediately whenever Kana was in danger. He boasted that the amulet was as effective as an item made by a specialized alchemist, and that, for an unemployed person like him, creating a cheap imitation was an easy task. After this frustrating situation, the old man finally opened the door for Meguru. Before leaving, the young hunter questioned the old man about the reason for his pursuit. When the eccentric man replied that it was because of an examination, Meguru asked a more specific question: why he had chosen a hunter who, like himself, was living through difficult times, seeking an honest life. The old man replied that he needed more strong men and was gathering hunters for a certain person. Upon questioning who this specific person was, Meguru pointed his sword, demanding that the man speak immediately. Under the threat, the old man finally spilled the beans, revealing that it was Matsubara Miyoshi, the former hero. Meguru asked what Matsubara's reason was for gathering such a fighting force. In complete shock and under threat, the old man, desperate, confessed that he did not know the real reason. At that moment, Meguru understood the situation and ordered the old man never to bother Kana or him again. To ensure the lesson was remembered, he left a small cut on the man's face before finally leaving through the door. Upon arriving home, Meguru, desperate, asked if Kana was all right. The girl, without resisting, hugged her brother and assured him she wasn't hurt. Meguru, in turn, apologized for leaving her alone, as he had entrusted the amulet to her. Kana asked if he wouldn't report the incident to the police. Meguru, however, explained that with Matsubara involved, the police would be powerless to do anything. The girl was surprised to learn that one of the 6 famous was implicated. Her brother then instructed Kana to pack her bags, as they would have to move. Living alone would be dangerous. He insisted that the move should be immediate, and that until they found a new place, she could stay with him. Kana felt embarrassed by the situation, but on the other hand, she mentioned that he had a double bed. Meguru, without malice, assured her that there would be no problem at all with her sleeping at his place, as he cared deeply for Kana, and it was natural for family to live together. The girl, in turn, didn't mind accepting the proposal, being with him. Meanwhile, upon arriving at the base where the old man was, the former hero Matsubara Miyoshi became extremely irritated upon seeing his henchmen eliminated. The old man knelt, apologizing for failing to recruit the hunter. Matsubara, furious at the failure, grabbed him by the hair and demanded information about the hunter. The old man revealed that his name was Izumi Meguru and that he was an unknown. However, upon hearing that name, the former hero seemed to remember something and dropped the old man to the floor. Matsubara, who was also known as the dungeon master, recalled Meguru upon hearing that he was strong for no reason and unemployed. He knew that he would normally deal with such a situation directly, but this time he decided he would investigate Meguru thoroughly, learning every single thing about him and using any imaginable method. The next day, Kana woke up in the double bed beside Meguru and tried to wake him. As he didn't wake up, she put on her boots and went outside. As soon as she opened the door, she noticed a strange purple magic hovering in the air. Meguru woke up, and upon seeing the magic, he hadn't imagined that a dungeon portal could appear in that location. Judging by the strength of the mana, it was probably a rank C dungeon. He asked Kana to wait in the room while he returned, but she refused, stating that he wouldn't go alone. After Kana insisted on going along, Meguru eventually accepted, and both entered the dungeon. Some time passed as they defeated the creatures within. Kana, however, realized that she hadn't been useful at all, even accompanying Meguru. Then, the young hero asked her to use Abyss Magic, a legendary ability capable of decreasing all of a target's attributes. Insecure, Kana stated that it would be impossible for her to use such powerful magic. After all, the only hero known to have manipulated the Abyss was Kana-sama 100 years ago, a legendary brave healer. Kana, in turn, was merely a cleric, and the difference between them seemed insurmountable. However, Izumi, seeing that his sister had lost her memories, was certain he could help her recover them. Suddenly, a dog-shaped monster appeared, catching them by surprise. While Izumi declared that someone else besides the Kana-sama of the past could use such power, he quickly immobilized the dog with magic and finished it with a precise kick. He then explained to his sister that the great advantage of being unemployed was the freedom to accomplish all sorts of things. Even as an inferior version of the original heroine, Kana was still capable of using Abyss Magic. Kana, who had no idea her brother's profession was so versatile, felt motivated. Izumi encouraged her to move forward, saying she could do the same as him. However, Kana insisted on deprecating herself, claiming she wasn't capable and considering him special. Izumi then detailed that all she needed to do was imagine the outcome and gather the necessary components. Once the technique was etched into her soul, it wouldn't be easy to lose it. He assured her that she had already mastered the basic parts. She just needed to try and believe in herself. Confident, Kana decided to try, especially after Izumi explained how to do it, suggesting that perhaps she didn't need to construct a difficult spell, but rather compile several simple ones on top of each other. No sooner had Izumi warned his sister that several wild dogs were approaching than Kana opened her eyes and with renewed focus conjured Abyss Magic. A ball of green energy captured the 3 dogs, and she could hardly believe she had actually succeeded. Izumi congratulated her and, seizing the moment, proposed teaching her the strength and adjustment spells. Kana found the idea absurd, as the spells were notoriously difficult, but she decided to try. At that instant, the final boss of the dungeon, a giant dog, appeared. It tried to strike a blow, but Izumi nimbly dodged to the side. The second spell Kana learned through Izumi was Strength, similar to Abyss, but with the function of increasing attributes instead of decreasing them. She used the spell on Izumi, who immediately began to move faster, enveloped in an intense glow. Approaching the giant dog, Izumi placed his hand on the ground and conjured a fire spell. Flames began to climb the creature, which was defeated at that exact moment. Kana then realized that she could be useful to Izumi and that they formed an excellent team. The unemployed man was surprised, as the fight had been much easier than he had imagined, all thanks to her contribution. The only thing that bothered him was that Kana's attributes should have increased after clearing the dungeon, but this didn't happen. Suddenly, a flow of energy appeared before them, resembling a portal and at the same time, the exit. Kana had never seen anything like it, but Izumi quickly deduced that it might be a double dungeon, an extremely rare phenomenon to encounter, an entire dungeon within another. He explained that the mana of the second dungeon was denser, and the monsters, consequently, stronger. It was probably a rank B dungeon, and if they didn't clear it, they wouldn't receive the reward. Kana, however, considered a rank B dungeon a natural disaster, comparable to meteors. She found the situation too dangerous, even for Izumi, and advised him to leave. However, Izumi, confident in the buffs Kana could grant, believed they were capable of facing that second dungeon. Thus, Izumi entered the newly appeared portal, but something unexpected began to happen. A crater opened between the two of them, leaving Izumi deeply worried about Kana. He tried to reach her as several giant rocks collapsed towards them. The protagonist cried out in despair, fearing that Kana had been buried and eliminated by the rocks. He began to furiously strike the giant rocks, determined to rescue his sister. Amidst the boulders, he found Kana alive, calling for help. Even with several rocks crushing her, she was conscious, and Izumi quickly pulled her out from among them. Kana revealed that she had survived thanks to the adjustment magic he had taught her, although the experience had been terrifying. After a hug of relief, Izumi was immensely happy that he had taught her the spell that increased attributes and, in the end, saved her. He considered the sudden collapse very strange, suspecting it was caused by someone's magic. Worried, he wondered if there was anyone else with them in that dungeon. Although he thought it impossible, both entered the second dungeon through the portal. As he expected, that dungeon was considerably more difficult than the previous one, and Izumi felt grateful for having taught Kana the spells, because, thanks to her, his attributes were much higher. However, he knew he was still nowhere near the level needed to achieve his revenge against the heroes. Kana noticed that he seemed anxious about something, but Izumi, lying, said he was just excited about the rewards he would get after clearing the place. Therefore, they headed towards the boss room, which he believed would be easy to overcome as long as they were together. Finally, upon opening the boss's door, they were confronted by a Cerberus. The three-headed dog advanced aggressively, ready to cast its spells. Izumi Meguru, our hero, asked Kana to perform a spell to protect him. Promptly, she cast 2 spells on him, and he then advanced against the monstrous dog. Dodging the initial blow, Meguru scaled the giant Cerberus, positioning himself directly in front of its 3 heads. Almost struck by the enormous claws, he dodged at the last second, retreating. As he expected from a rank B boss, the creature had left a scratch on his face. Despite recognizing the enemy's strength, Meguru did not give up, continuing to evade its blows. He pondered that even wolves with the toughest hides possess their weaknesses, such as the throat. Meguru drew his dagger and threw it, but the creature bit it and destroyed his weapon. Realizing the swiftness of Cerberus's response, he concluded that he needed to be even faster than the creature. Although he recognized the enemy's great strength, Izumi knew he could defeat it with Kana's buffs. He recalled that anyone aspiring to be a hunter needed to master one of the elements of nature, or light and darkness. However, being unemployed, he possessed the rare ability to use all elements. Charging his body with mana and all elements, Meguru advanced towards the Cerberus, which launched attacks that he easily dodged. Through friction, he united earth and wind magic, creating plasma, and thus prepared to attack the monster. He made 2 powerful cuts with the plasma, enveloping and decapitating the Cerberus's 3 heads. With a single blow, he defeated the dungeon boss, which fell to the ground, eliminated. At that moment, his stats increased and he received the reward, a card that would allow him to undertake rank C dungeons repeatedly. Izumi Meguru commented that he had only received a scratch, while discreetly hiding the card from Kana. Behind him, a hidden man observed the fight and concluded that Izumi Meguru was stronger than he had expected. This man, a mercenary, spoke with Matsubara, who had hired him to investigate the boy. He reported that Meguru was extremely competent, as he had cleared a double dungeon built by the former hero. An ordinary unemployed person would never have the necessary skills to get out of a place like that alive. The mercenary stated that Meguru seemed to have a lot of experience, suggesting he had lived through much despite his young age. He was sure that the boy could ascend to rank A, however, he possessed a clear weak point. If Matsubara knew how to take advantage of it, Meguru would become weaker than a rank E hunter. The dungeon master realized that the decision to investigate the protagonist had been quite shrewd. Then, the mercenary received a briefcase containing more money than initially offered, serving as payment for the completed mission and an advance for the next task. He noted that they were paying to eliminate Meguru and considered it nothing major, as he was the great rank A Saito. Matsubara handed a legendary sword to the mercenary, who pondered for a moment before accepting. Finally, he accepted the mission and the sword with a malicious smile. Meanwhile, at home, Izumi Meguru had never seen a dungeon ticket in his life. He wondered how that magical item worked, which he still hadn't shown to his sister. In his current state, a rank C dungeon should be quite easy. He concentrated his mana and opened the item to see how it worked, being immediately teleported to an island, a dungeon he had never seen before. Furthermore, the exit was not in sight, and he would not be able to leave until he defeated the boss. A message appeared informing him that the first daily mission had begun, with a total of 100 creatures. Meguru was shocked to see so many monsters coming towards him, knowing it would be exhausting. He began eliminating all the monsters on the island, which included giant crabs. In a short time, he had already reached the final count of creatures, completing his daily mission. However, feeling very tired, a new and great danger emerged from the ground. The ground broke open, revealing a monster much stronger compared to the previous enemies, an enormous lobster with a shell on its back, which was clearly the boss. But in the end, it was only a rank C boss, whose current strength would not be difficult to face. Conjuring a very powerful fire magic, Meguru launched it like a whirlwind, exploding the lobster. The reward was another dungeon ticket and a potion that restored all health, unlike other locations that granted status upon being cleared. He accepted the potion, and then his body began to disintegrate from there, returning to his home, where Kana was sleeping soundly, without even noticing his departure. Furthermore, the dungeon ticket did not disappear after use. Meanwhile, at the Hunters Association, people were surprised by Meguru's appearance, though he didn't quite understand why. Kana explained that he was an unemployed individual who had passed the special exam. People found this very fascinating, something the protagonist had not expected. The two siblings were assigned a special mission to find Saito and go to a dungeon. Meguru was being sought by him, and the receptionist's guess was that he had attracted attention during the test. Our hero accepted the mission, as Saito wanted to speak with him. After some time, Izumi Meguru met with Saito, who greeted him and acknowledged his strength. The other two party members, who had joined merely to fill the quota required for the reward, remained somewhat peripheral. Meguru and Saito, on the other hand, fought side by side against the dungeon creatures. During the combat, Meguru exclaimed that Saito was the second highest ranked individual, surpassed only by the 6 heroes. At that instant, a lizard tried to attack him, but was immediately incinerated by our hero. Saito, observing the scene, recognized Meguru's strength, confirming what was already said about him. Now, seeing him up close, he fully understood his power. With a malicious expression, Saito mused that someone so strong should be capable of clearing a dungeon like that alone. He then informed Meguru that he and the rest of the team would take care of collecting all the loot, going unnoticed. Meguru, not understanding Saito's true intentions, felt grateful for the experience bonus he received for having an A-level hero on his team. As he continued to defeat the dungeon monsters, Meguru asked Saito why he had wanted him on his team. The high-level hero, with an enigmatic smile, drew a special sword and, in a swift movement, lunged at the protagonist. Betraying Meguru, Saito revealed that his true motive was to eliminate him. Our hero, with sharp reflexes, dodged to the side, managing to avoid the fatal blow and emerge unscathed. The other team members were shocked by their leader's actions. Without hesitation, ordered everyone to be silent. Next, Saito delivered a cut to one of their legs, regretting not having eliminated the minor obstacles first. Without mercy, he eliminated the rest of his party members, stating he had no time to waste, as he needed to eliminate Meguru as quickly as possible. With a terrifying aura, Saito advanced again, causing Meguru to instinctively protect Kana, asking her to retreat while he handled the situation alone. Meguru, realizing the seriousness of the confrontation, admitted to himself that he had never had such a serious duel before. Alone with the enemy, he launched an attack, charging energy into his fist. He knew this type of fight was inevitable to achieve his revenge, and with his head held high, he launched a purple magic at Saito, which caused a mana explosion. However, to his surprise, the villain remained alive, emerging intact from the smoke. Saito calmly lit a cigarette and stated that he didn't hate Meguru, explaining that he was merely acting on Matsubara's orders. He asked Meguru not to hold any grudges, then advanced, delivering precise cuts with his sword. During the intense duel, Saito revealed that Matsubara Matsubara had a peculiar interest in Meguru, seemingly bothered specifically by how strong the young man was becoming. Suddenly, Saito vanished and reappeared, delivering a kick to Meguru's stomach, an attack he hadn't anticipated. Our protagonist reacted poorly to the blow, falling to the ground, weakened. The fatigue accumulated on the journey there was now hindering him, and he finally understood why Saito had let him deal with the monsters until that moment. Despite his exhaustion, Meguru affirmed to himself that there was no chance he would die there, as he needed to protect Kana. He didn't want to relive the past or allow it to repeat, so he focused on the present and awakened an absurd inner power. Charging at his target with extreme speed which worried Saito, Meguru executed several rapid movements, appearing behind his enemy in an instant. Surprised, Saito tried to react, but the protagonist was faster, delivering a punch that knocked him down. Saito, recognizing that the boy was growing stronger with each passing moment, revealed that he had prepared something for this occasion, as he had anticipated this possibility. In a desperate move, he immobilized Kana, pointing his sword at her neck. Saito knew that Kana was Meguru's weakness, and demanded that he follow his orders if he didn't want her eliminated. Under those circumstances, before he could eliminate his target, Kana would be killed, and Meguru was confused about what to do. Furthermore, he was extremely exhausted, which worsened his reasoning and strength. Taking out his potion, he decided to stake everything on it. If he were at his peak, he would be faster and stronger than his enemy. Immediately after drinking the yellow potion, his body reacted well, and he became incredibly fast. With a precise kick, Meguru sent Saito's sword flying, disarming him. In an instant, he positioned himself behind the enemy. Our hero then declared that Saito shouldn't have underestimated him, as he was already back in motion. Overcoming the situation, Meguru unleashed a magic shot to Saito's head, eliminating the enemy. Kana, relieved, began casting healing spells to save the party members who had been attacked by Saito. She confirmed that they were still breathing and needed to be taken to the hospital immediately. Meguru was unsure whether they should leave now or if he should clear the dungeon first before heading to the exit. After all, clearing the area would be quick with the special sword he had taken from the defeated enemy. He had felt a strange energy when Saito used it, but now he felt nothing. Entering the boss room, he encountered a gigantic lizard with crystals on its head. With no time to spare on the creature, he used the sword and delivered a cut that split it in half. After defeating the creature, he received 50 more points in all his attributes. After the battle, Izumi Meguru not only obtained the Crest of Duty, but also noticed the appearance of a strange mark on the palm of his hand, questioning its meaning. Meanwhile, the secretaries of the Hunter Association could barely believe what they were seeing, shocked by the idea that a monster could have defeated a rank A hunter of Saito's caliber. In response to their disbelief, Meguru stated that it was common for hunters to die in dungeons. After a long period of reflection, Meguru decided to keep Saito's true fate a secret, fabricating stories that aligned with what would be the fate of the two survivors. The association's secretaries, however, still found it hard to believe, as Saito was known for his extraordinary strength and unparalleled talent. He cleared all types of dungeons on his own and had triumphed in the prestigious Dragonlord Festival, where hunters competed against each other. Hearing the secretary's persistence, Meguru intimidated the secretary, who, coerced, tried to consider the possibility that someone from the group had stabbed Saito in the back. To prevent further accusations, Izumi Meguru questioned the reason for such a supposition, asking if she truly believed any of the team members would have the courage for such an act. Completely intimidated, the young woman apologized, as she herself found it impossible for anyone to have the necessary strength to eliminate Saito, remembering the magic Meguru used to defeat the rank A hunter. Declaring himself exhausted, Meguru left the location accompanied by Kana. His sister, who wished to reveal the truth, was dissuaded by him, as he believed involving the police would only turn the situation into a major mess. When Kana asked the real reason for his silence, he lied, stating that Saito's death was the hunter's own fault, and that Meguru should not be held responsible. The dungeon had disappeared after being cleared, leaving no evidence for the police to investigate. The true reason for hiding the truth from the association, however, was that Meguru did not want to receive unwanted attention. He was already a person of interest due to the promotional exam, and Matsubara was already keeping an eye on him. At that moment, Meguru wished to avoid any trouble, focusing exclusively on his revenge. Suddenly, Meguru began to feel a strong headache and dizziness, which left Kana quite worried. After this episode, he went to bed and took some medicine. Meguru believed these symptoms were a direct consequence of having taken a human life. He had never eliminated anyone before, and at that moment had found no way to avoid the act. He had never felt so unwell, realizing that this was the heavy cost of taking a life. However, he knew he would have to deal with this reality, as his next step would be to eliminate the 6 heroes. Shortly after, Kana arrived, bringing him some soup to eat, as Meguru was unable to take his medicine. He thanked her and ate the soup, which helped him recover. Feeling healed, Meguru noticed that Kana hadn't changed and possessed the components of a high-level healer heroine, imagining that, in her subconscious, she must have applied some kind of healing magic to the soup she prepared. Soon, the girl realized that the fact he had eliminated Saito was bothering him. So, she offered her support, saying that he was protecting everyone and that it hadn't been his fault, so he shouldn't worry. Meguru didn't want to worry her, but Kana's support was of extreme importance to him. At that moment, Kana noticed the mark on Meguru's palm, which he explained had appeared out of nowhere. Suddenly, he began to feel that the mark was weaker than the last time he had observed it. Meanwhile, Matsubara felt guilty for having involved Saito in that situation. After all, he was his right-hand man. Thanks to Saito, Matsubara was able to build a strong base in Japan, surpassing the other heroes. Among all the mercenaries available for hire in Japan, Saito was without a doubt the strongest. The fact that the young Izumi Meguru had managed to eliminate him made Matsubara question Meguru's true identity. He didn't care who Meguru was, he just knew he couldn't leave him alone, as he indeed posed a threat. Matsubara also considered the possibility that Saito might have already revealed to Meguru that he was behind everything. Before the situation worsened even further, Matsubara decided to eliminate the protagonist, just as he had eliminated that man hundreds of years ago. At the same time, Meguru woke up and noticed that the mark on his hand had vanished, which left him completely bewildered. Kana also woke up and asked if he felt better, to which the protagonist replied that he was fine. Knowing that Kana wasn't experienced enough to protect herself on her own, Meguru wondered if he should take her with him that day. Picking up the dungeon ticket, he asked his sister to accompany him for a short while. Kana, surprised by the sudden change, asked what was happening as he invited her to a dungeon. She thought he was too sick to return to fighting the very next day, but Meguru, in turn, explained that it wouldn't be him fighting, but her. The two were teleported, and Meguru began training her so she could stay alive on her own. The girl faced great difficulties staying safe and sound, and after a long day of training, using her magic, she felt exhausted. However, Kana managed to complete the daily quest of the dungeon system, receiving as a reward an amulet that prevented instant death and a B-rank dungeon ticket. Upon seeing the 2 rewards Kana had received, Meguru showed great excitement. The amulet, in particular, possessed the ability to instantly nullify an attack that would otherwise be fatal. Meguru was certain that item would be extremely useful in the future. Shortly after, when Meguru and Kana returned to the Hunter Association, they were informed that the sector chief wished to speak with them. Without beating around the bush, the chief revealed he knew Meguru had eliminated Saito, the A-rank hunter. The chief argued that it was impossible for Saito to have been eliminated by a monster inside a dungeon, as there were several dark rumors circulating about what had truly happened to him, which led the chief to suspect the protagonist. However, the chief didn't believe Meguru had set up Saito. On the contrary, he supposed Saito had attacked first. Furthermore, this situation indicated that Meguru was strong enough, possessing a notable talent capable of suppressing rank differences. Kana, in turn, intervened, stating that the chief was exaggerating, as Meguru was merely a low-class, unemployed, and couldn't have done such a thing. The chief, however, revealed he had heard stories of an unemployed hero who existed hundreds of years ago, and considered the possibility of Meguru being his reincarnation. However, he mused that it wouldn't be strange for another unemployed individual to emerge with such strength. Meguru noticed the chief's shrewdness, who, it seemed, didn't care whether Saito had been eliminated or not. If Meguru was truly strong enough for such a feat, the chief would like to make a special request of him. The mission in question was located in an area under the jurisdiction of the Shibuya Hunter Association. The request was for Meguru to help the neighboring association conquer a newly emerged dungeon. Currently, the highest dungeon level was A rank, and the local association was gathering the strongest hunters to face it. However, they were apprehensive and had specifically requested Meguru to join the team. Kana, who would also be part of the mission, was happy to join the main team, as many people would participate in that A-rank dungeon mission. Meguru assured Kana that she would be fine, and then both apologized to the rest of the team waiting for them. A group composed of 3 women greeted the newly arrived reinforcements. The knight, Nozomi Sakuragi, expressed her opinion that they should have resolved the situation themselves, considering the association's interference excessive. However, the mage Mihara and the warrior Omichi disagreed with her, showing satisfaction with the arrival of the reinforcements. Nozomi then asked them not to get in her way and questioned each of their hunter ranks and professions. Kana replied that she was a D-rank cleric, while Meguru revealed he was also a D-rank unemployed. The knight, realizing that the two were of a weak rank, stated that they could rely on her skills. She added that Meguru's unemployed status would be useless no matter how skilled he was. Approaching Meguru, Nozomi warned him that if he got distracted in the dungeon, he would be eliminated. The mage Mihara, however, thought Nozomi was going too far with her advice, which sounded more like threats. Faced with this conflicting situation, Kana promptly positioned herself beside Meguru. Knight Nozomi, for her part, knew that overestimating one's own abilities could lead to a tragic end, and if that happened, the pain would not only affect the person involved, but also those who cared about them. It was for this reason that Nozomi spoke up, showing concern for the protagonist's life. Meguru and Kana, in turn, noticed a storm brewing, foreshadowing that the situation would be quite grim. Our hero then spoke reassuring words to Kana, encouraging her to move forward. He assured her that she was strong, that everything would be all right, and that she should believe in him, not the team's words. As soon as they entered the dungeon, they encountered a terrifying-looking minotaur. The warrior Omichi, without hesitation, charged at the creature with her enormous axe, delivering a powerful blow. The strike knocked the minotaur to the ground, and the mage Mihara seized the opportunity to cast a fire spell at it. Finally, Nozomi advanced with her sword, finishing off the giant creature. The mage Mihara commented that this A-rank dungeon seemed similar to B-rank ones. Although the monsters were resilient, they could handle the situation and should maintain their formation to win. As they decided to advance to the next monster, they noticed that the weak reinforcements, Meguru and Kana, had followed them this far. The girls immediately sent Meguru and Kana to the back as several minotaurs began to appear, making the situation dangerous. Even the experienced hunters began to retreat, startled by the overwhelming number of minotaurs. The pink-haired girl, Nozomi, thought they couldn't handle it. However, Meguru and his sister Kana began to prepare for the fight. The protagonist delivered a kick followed by a precise sword slash against one of the minotaurs, winning the combat in an instant. The other group members, who had not expected such performance from the reinforcements, were visibly impressed. Nozomi, who had previously considered him weak, was even more impressed and couldn't understand what had just happened. The mage Mihara warned Nozomi that something was coming from behind her, and the knight was almost hit by the attack of two minotaurs. However, a magic shield appeared beneath her, saving her from an imminent attack. It was magic conjured by Meguru. After being saved and emerging unharmed, Nozomi finally noticed Meguru's true strength. The knight then apologized for what she had said earlier, admitting she had misjudged the two because of their profession and rank. Kana, however, didn't truly care about the apologies, as, in her view, being a hunter meant constantly oscillating between life and death. To Meguru, Nozomi's attempt to keep them away had been done out of kindness. Nozomi became visibly shy upon hearing about her kindness, as it had been years since she had been praised by anyone. The team, now more united, decided to continue, staying alert to their rear and working together to exit the dungeon. 2 hours later, with Kana's buffs, Knight Nozomi became even stronger and managed to defeat several monsters. Nozomi, observing them, began to wonder who they really were and what kind of relationship the two shared. The group had fought for a considerable time, and to everyone's surprise, had not yet reached the final boss room, which they found extremely strange. They began to suspect that the Dungeon of Renunciation operated in a peculiarly complicated way. Nozomi, the knight, pondered that perhaps the difficulty was due to it being their first time facing an A-rank dungeon. However, the protagonist, Meguru, pointed to a mark he himself had carved into the wall, a method to prevent them from getting lost. It was then that everyone understood. They were walking in circles, repeatedly passing through the same places. Meguru found that strange, as he hadn't noticed any branching paths. Quickly, he understood the situation and decided he would try to resolve it. As he placed his hand on the wall, Meguru felt a subtle vibration and discovered a secret passage. Nozomi, surprised, asked how he had discovered that hidden path as no one else had noticed it. Meguru explained that many higher-ranked dungeons possessed this kind of trick. It was a type of barrier that couldn't be crossed without knowing the solution to the enigma. It wouldn't be possible to reach the final boss until the riddle was solved. His companions questioned him, curious about how he knew so much, given that this was his first dungeon. He replied that it was obvious, as he had suffered greatly while navigating similar dungeons in his past life. This experience allowed him to develop a refined detection technique, using his mana to perceive which parts of the walls were hollow. To the group, he simply said that he had read about it in a book a long time ago. Nozomi then stated that she would stay at the vanguard, in charge of defense against the boss. Hikari, in turn, would remain at the rear protecting Kana. Although an A-level boss was certainly stronger than the group expected, Meguru already had a plan in mind. The knight asked if he was all right, and upon receiving a yes as a response, they entered the dungeon ready for the fight. Suddenly, they encountered an enormous, furious, bearded minotaur. The creature immediately launched an attack with its giant axe, which the protagonist narrowly dodged. Meguru realized that the enemy was much stronger than he had imagined, and instructed Nozomi to wait before attacking. Nozomi, however, raised her shield and attempted to defend against the minotaur's attack, but the blow was so powerful that her defense shattered. With her shield broken, she took the full impact of the strike and was thrown backward. The other girls were in shock, as they had never witnessed an attack that Nozomi couldn't block with her shield. A knight's defense, no matter how robust, couldn't compare to that of a specialized tank. Even as a strong knight, she was facing an A-rank boss in close combat, an extremely dangerous situation. Our protagonist, Meguru, ordered Sakura to evacuate Nozomi, as the knight was severely wounded. He asked his sister, Kana, to heal the injured girl while he dealt with the dungeon boss himself. Advancing towards the furious armored bull, which promptly hurled its weapon at him, Meguru dodged again, realizing that those attacks could be instantly fatal. The situation was complicated, with the girls in danger, and he knew he would have to give his all to endure the fight. However, if he found an opening, no matter how brief, he would seize it without hesitation. The moment the boss raised its arm to strike, Meguru found the opening he needed. He conjured ice magic, striking the ground forcefully. Frozen spikes emerged, hitting and damaging the minotaur. The minotaur, though wounded, remained standing. The protagonist noticed that despite its immense strength, its defense seemed to be a weak point. With an agile leap, Meguru dodged a brutal blow and, seizing the moment, climbed onto the minotaur's weapon, running swiftly across it. After a quick sprint, he jumped, reaching the height of the dungeon boss's head. The minotaur tried to retaliate, but in doing so, it was actually creating its own opening. Meguru knew that as long as he possessed the amulet that prevented instant death, he would be safe from a fatal blow. Declaring it the final strike, he wielded Saitu's sword and delivered a devastating top-to-bottom slash. The minotaur was struck across its entire body. Meguru felt a wave of relief, happy to have won, even if by such a narrow margin. To his astonishment, however, the creature was still alive, its eyes now burning red with hatred. Our hero could hardly believe the minotaur was still standing. The boss charged towards him. Charging at high speed, imbued with hatred, Meguru felt he couldn't withstand another attack from the enemy. The minotaur slammed its axe into the ground in a fury. Izumi, observing, was certain the creature was severely damaged. Meguru mused that he wouldn't suffer a scratch if he could engage in a battle of attrition. The moment the creature delivered an overwhelming blow, he dodged, lowering his body. Seeing the creature's giant weapon before him, he wondered if it would be possible to perform combo attacks. First, he realized he could dodge the minotaur's giant weapon attack. Then, seeing the blow up close, he thought it might be his end. After the minotaur's deafening roar as it hurled its flaming axe, the protagonist felt an overwhelming fear. However, Kana appeared to save him, bravely placing herself in front of him. Desperate, Meguru ordered her to get out of the way, but then the hero understood something crucial. He saw her get hit, and immediately afterward, the amulet that prevented instant death activated, saving her. The moment he understood Kana's strategy, Meguru grabbed the sacred sword and didn't miss the chance to deliver the final blow. As expected from an A-rank dungeon, the group gained 50 points. Meguru didn't know the exact origin of this bonus, but he suspected it was related to the crest of duty and the mark he possessed. His teammates, observing his performance, considered him to be beyond normal. Meguru had momentarily forgotten about Kana, but he quickly noticed that she was fine. He stated that he would have lost if it weren't for her, and asked her never to do what she did again, as he almost had a heart attack. Kana, in turn, retorted, saying that he was the one who always put himself in danger. Nozomi then questioned if Meguru was truly an unemployed D-rank, as she found it absurd that he had defeated an A-rank boss. The protagonist believed he would now become a C-class hunter for the association, explaining that it was difficult to get missions due to his low rank. The moment the pink-haired girl took his hand, Kana felt jealous. Nozomi then invited the two of them to join her guild, explaining that guilds are independent groups of hunters. As the master of this guild, she found it shameful for someone like Meguru not to be in a group, arguing that if they joined, they would gain more rank and money, and that their guild didn't take a cut of the rewards. Meguru thanked her, but declined the offer, explaining that it wouldn't be good for either of them. The girl then said that it wasn't about it being a good offer, but rather about feeling safe with him in the guild, expressing her desire for them to work together. The protagonist found her reaction unusual. Being very clear, Meguru stated that he and Kana didn't plan to join guilds or groups, explaining that even if the offer was good, being in a guild restricted where and what he could do. Seeing that he he held this belief, the guildmaster decided not to try and convince him. She stated that everyone would have died if it weren't for him, and decided to thank him, proposing that just the two of them meet the next day. Nozomi was very happy when Meguru accepted her proposal. At her request, the protagonist explained that Kana was just a normal member of his party, as he couldn't say she was his reincarnated sister, and thus had to lie. Nozomi became even happier with the answer, and was clearly flirting with him. Suddenly, another purple portal appeared, surprising everyone. After finishing the dungeon, they went home. Meguru announced he was leaving, which irritated Kana, as she seemed to be in love with him. Even more so after he said he cared about her, Kana was angry that he was going out with Nozomi. So, the protagonist went to the subway and met the pink-haired girl. Meguru made Nozomi wait for almost an hour, but she said she had only been there for 5 minutes. The two went to a restaurant to eat pasta and have a romantic moment. During dinner, Nozomi asked what Meguru did on his days off. He replied that he just rested a lot until the next missions. She quickly understood that the protagonist didn't have a girlfriend, and was very happy when she heard Meguru say that he truly wasn't with anyone. She then tried to hide her excitement, and Meguru didn't understand her agitation. In response, he asked what she did in her free time. She said she also used her free time to rest properly. The protagonist was surprised, as younger people like her usually went out. Nozomi explained that she wanted to become stronger, as she remembered what he had said about overestimating herself. She stated that it had happened to her before, and she had come close to a tragedy in her life because, by trusting herself too much, she lost her best friend. She never wanted to experience anything like that again in her life. That's why she worked so hard, and Meguru identified with what she went through, as he also wanted to protect Kana, not wishing to lose her again, as he had in his past life. Regarding Kana, Nozomi asked if they were just teammates and what their true relationship was. Meguru replied that they were teammates who lived together. The pink-haired girl was shocked to discover they resided in the same place, and when he mentioned they even slept in the same room, Nozomi was stunned. He had ruined her mood. She became quiet and sad, even though he had spoken gently about his relationship with Kana. After she remarked that it was strange for them to live together, he suggested they stop at a specific establishment. They arrived in front of an incredible weapon shop. Nozomi found the shop amazing, with excellent prices for the quality of the armaments, and Meguru was pleased he had managed to quickly and easily mend her mood. With a Chinese accent, the shop owner asked if they needed anything. It was rare for foreigners of their age to be in Japan at that time, and the protagonist found this unusual. Nozomi picked up a sword and was impressed by its quality. Meguru didn't know much about swords, but the girl asked him to handle the weapon. The protagonist swung the sword and deemed it a good weapon. With his accent, the shop owner asked Meguru what kind of weapon he usually used. In response, Meguru Izumi summoned his legendary sword, displaying it to the shopkeeper, who was visibly shocked. Upon seeing the crest of duty mark on the blade, the man became enraged, presuming that Meguru worked for Matsubara. Consumed by anger, he grabbed his own weapon, preparing to attack Meguru Izumi. Faced with the shopkeeper's fury and his drawn weapon, Meguru felt apprehensive. He drew his own sword, trying to explain that it was all a misunderstanding. However, the shopkeeper refused to listen and charged at Meguru. Meguru warned that he couldn't help if the attack persisted and, with agility, grabbed the man's arm. Demonstrating obvious superior strength, Meguru brought the shop attendant to the ground. He tried not to hurt him but had no alternative but to restrain him. Then, he asked exactly what was happening and why the shopkeeper had attacked him. Meguru considered that it would be a problem if Nozomi started prying into those circumstances, so he thanked her for the fun day and decided to end their outing right there. Taking the shop owner to the warehouse, Meguru reaffirmed that he did not work for Matsubara. If he did, the shopkeeper would already be dead by now. Therefore, he decided to ask the attendant why he had thought Meguru worked for Matsubara. The man replied that the symbol on the sword, the raven's crest, was present on all the ex-hero's weapons. This symbol, he explained, carried part of the dungeon master's power. Meguru then understood that Matsubara had enchanted the sword he now used. Meguru stated that he had obtained that sword after defeating a man who worked for Matsubara. This revelation shocked the shopkeeper, who finally believed Meguru. Now that his questions had been answered, Meguru cornered the man to reveal what he knew about Matsubara. The shopkeeper disclosed that he had been investigating Matsubara for the past 5 years, with the intention of eliminating him. The shop attendant described Matsubara as a monster who had become a dungeon master 100 years ago. He would release monsters at any time, causing swarms in the city. In this way, no one, not even the government, could oppose him. Meguru knew that dungeon masters had access to 4 special powers granted by the government. Matsubara used these powers to create new dungeons and ensure his eternal youth. Furthermore, they could completely control their own dungeons and became much stronger through S-rank dungeon blessings. Meguru Meguru declared that Matsubara would not escape using his malevolent power. The shopkeeper believed that Matsubara viewed people merely as tools to satisfy his desires. He had introduced many taxes solely to line his own pockets, turning citizens into paupers on the brink of total starvation. However, any sign of discontent was severely punished by the ex-hero. The shopkeeper asked if Meguru Izumi knew about the Party of Happiness. Meguru replied that he did not, but he had a premonition that the name did not match its true meaning. The shopkeeper confirmed that the name could not be worse, as it referred to a group of women forced to serve the tyrant. Although officially they only entertained him and gave massages, it was an open secret that they also performed malicious favors. His own daughter had been taken to be part of the Party of Happiness. His wife was also taken when she resisted and ended up being eliminated. That was why the shopkeeper felt such rage and swore to eliminate Matsubara, coming to Japan for that very purpose. The shop owner stated that it was impossible to eliminate the ex-hero inside his own dungeon. However, knowing that Matsubara frequently visited Japan and was in the country at that moment, the shopkeeper had come to find him. Now, Meguru understood why the shopkeeper was on the verge of a breakdown. The shopkeeper apologized for attacking him, as he had genuinely believed Meguru worked for the tyrant. Meguru accepted the apology, but asserted that the shopkeeper would never be able to eliminate the villain that way. Consumed by renewed anger, the shopkeeper lunged at Meguru, claiming he knew nothing. Catching the man's punch, Meguru affirmed that he empathized with him, but warned him about the difference in strength between them and the enemy. Furthermore, it would be he, Meguru, who would obliterate the ex-hero, not the shopkeeper. At that moment, the shopkeeper suggested that Meguru Izumi join his group, stating that they should fight together. He believed they could help each other and become friends to achieve their personal revenge. Meguru immediately refused, and the shopkeeper asked why. Meguru reaffirmed that he would eliminate Matsubara with his own hands. Furthermore, he had no interest in making friends, preferring to be a lone wolf. Kana was the only person he trusted, and he would never trust another. The shopkeeper argued that the mutual desire to eliminate Matsubara would be sufficient reason for an alliance. He claimed there were strong people in his group, and that Meguru would be in danger if he did not join. However, no matter what the shopkeeper said, Meguru would not change his mind so easily. Meguru then left the shop, exactly as he had discussed with Kana the day before. Meguru asked Kana to stay home, assuring her he would be back soon, and she obeyed. Kana, referring to him as "my boy," thought Meguru was going to talk to an acquaintance, suspecting it was the same woman from before. She began to seethe with jealousy, wondering why he hadn't told her the truth. Pondering why he was hiding the truth, Kana decided to go after him and follow Meguru, certain that he wasn't telling her about the events unfolding. As Kana pursued him, Meguru almost noticed her presence. However, he quickly dismissed the feeling, thinking it was just his imagination, and continued his way through the streets. Meguru was there to settle matters with the Chinese man's group, as they had decided to fight for the right to eliminate Matsubara. A group of people in military attire and grim expressions watched Meguru. Members of the group had heard he didn't intend to join them and wanted to confirm it. Meguru clearly stated that he did not want to be part of the group. Seeing no other option, the group began to attack him. One of the men, dressed in military uniform, threw a punch, which Meguru blocked with his arm. He felt the attacker was powerful but hesitant, and quickly delivered a punch to his stomach. He used the momentum to knock him to the ground, deciding to take advantage of the opponent's weak point. The Chinese man, leader of the group, thought they couldn't let him leave alive, even if he was so strong. Meguru noticed the entire group's lack of combat experience. Seeing that was all they had to offer, he found the combat ridiculously easy. He delivered a sequence of blows, knocking everyone down at once. He noted that the group's desire to eliminate Matsubara would be impossible to achieve. The military men kept getting up and trying to fight Meguru, but they couldn't land a hit. The hero delivered a powerful punch against one of them, asking if they weren't tired of getting beaten yet. Their boss declared that the fight had come to an end, as they couldn't take any more. The bald boss praised Izumi, saying he was incredibly skilled for his age and congratulated him. As promised, all the information they had gathered about Matsubara would be his. They handed him a document, and Kana, hidden behind the door, saw everything. She wondered what they were talking about and was relieved it wasn't a meeting with Nozomi. Meguru was then leaving the warehouse when he ran into Kana. He asked why she was there, and Kana, embarrassed, apologized for having followed him out of curiosity. Meguru hoped she hadn't heard the main part of the conversation. Kana then took his hand and asked what else he was hiding from her at that moment. She also asked why he wanted to get revenge on the former hero Matsubara so badly. Meguru knew that if he answered, he would have to explain how he and Kana were connected, which could trigger her memory of horrible things from the past. He stated that he couldn't tell her, and Kana questioned why. She said he was acting strange and hiding things from her. All of this led her to lose trust in Meguru, and she wanted to be alone. Pulling away from him and running, she told him to stay away. away. Matsubara, in turn, reflected on Meguru, the unemployed man who refused the organization and eliminated Saito. He felt a lot of anger towards Meguru and found his actions unforgivable. Therefore, he wanted to meet him in person as soon as possible. However, a direct action would attract too much attention. In such moments, he needed to use his head and noticed the presence of a girl on the street. He decided to use Akasaka Kana to lure Meguru into a convenient situation. In any case, Matsubara realized that this girl really looked like Meguru's sister. The former hero found Meguru's profession incomprehensible. After all, Meguru possessed nothing, but he was intelligent and had a mysterious sense of justice. It didn't matter, as this wouldn't hinder his path, and he would eliminate Izumi as quickly as possible, just as he had done with Akabane, Meguru, and his sister hundreds of years ago. Meanwhile, Kana reflected, thinking she had been too harsh with Meguru and hated when he hid things from her. But Akasaka Kana didn't want to fight with him and remain in this situation. She tried to understand why he had said he couldn't tell her the secret, even though he wanted to. She considered the possibility that Meguru had a very good reason to keep this secret from her, and since she was the one who followed him there, she wasn't in a position to complain about it. First, she wanted to make amends and keep a cool head. She sent him a text message on his phone, apologizing for her actions. It was at that moment that someone stopped and spoke to her in the square. Matsubara said he wasn't anyone suspicious and raised his arms, pretending to be friendly. Kana, with a sense of familiarity, recognized the man in front of her as one of the 6 legendary former heroes. However, the most vivid memory came next. He was the leader of the group that had attacked the protagonist. Matsubara, in turn, asked if she was Meguru's companion, claiming to know him and possess information about his past that even she shouldn't know. Curious, he inquired if Kana would be interested in such revelations. As he tried to extend his hand to her, Matsubara realized that the girl wasn't taking the bait. Kana, instead of giving in, questioned what Izumi's secret was, and Matsubara, in turn, asked if she was truly curious. Even aware of the danger the man represented, Kana felt a strong desire to hear what he had to say, trusting in the talisman she carried, capable of saving her life if something bad happened. With a wicked smile, the red-bearded man promised to tell her everything. The moment the situation became dangerous, Kana used her special item. However, the effect was insignificant. Matsubara, completely unfazed, delivered a punch to the girl. Kana fell unconscious to the ground. Matsubara then declared that he would fulfill his promise and reveal the secrets, but only after calling Izumi Meguru and resolving the pending issues between them. Finally, the red-bearded man kidnapped the reincarnated protagonist's sister. Matsubara left Kana tied up in a strange place that resembled a dungeon. The girl woke up, furious with her situation. She vociferated that nobody liked him and that they would never help him eliminate Meguru. Repeating that, the black one is strong, Kana was treated by Matsubara like a child. He called her cutie, saying he liked her naughty side and that she should be happy because he had taken a liking to her, and once everything was over, she would become his wife. Next, he made a fair trade, taking her cell phone. When Kana started to complain, Matsubara punched the wall, ordering her to be silent. He told her to just watch, promising that she would see Izumi lamentably crushed by despair and fear. Meanwhile, the protagonist, Meguru, found it strange that Kana had not yet returned home at that hour. He expected to receive a call from her number, as he had accepted her apology. As soon as he answered, he heard the voice of a man he did not immediately recognize. The person on the other end of the line then revealed that he had the girl, stating that if Meguru wanted her back, he would have to go to the designated address. Desperate, the protagonist began to shout, asking if Kana was all right. Upon checking the sent location, he declared that he did not know who had done this, but that the responsible party would pay dearly for their actions. Our hero then affirmed that he would go to the location to obliterate this person. Arriving at the address, Meguru observed chains attempting to prevent him from passing. He then spotted Matsubara around a bonfire, who commented on his swift arrival. It was then that Meguru realized the voice he had heard on the call was familiar. In a way, he was even happier that Kana's kidnapper was Matsubara, as he already wished to eliminate the former hero anyway. He pointed his sword at Matsubara, who advised him not to be in such a hurry. Matsubara explained that Kana was inside a portal, and that if Meguru left, the entire dungeon would go with him. Upon hearing this, the protagonist lowered his weapon, indignant. He followed Matsubara into the dungeon that the villain himself had built, a place without monsters. Matsubara revealed that as soon as he wished to erase the dungeon, no trace would remain, making it a perfect place to get rid of people. Our hero concluded that Matsubara wanted to get rid of him simply for messing with him. Meguru then understood that the double dungeon in front of their house had been the work of the former hero. Holding his sword, Meguru asked if Kana was injured, and Matsubara invited him to see for himself. Thus, he opened that imposing door, revealing Kana at the center of a cross. The two met, and the protagonist told her to wait, as he would rescue her at that very moment. The former hero picked up his giant hammer and declared the start of combat. Before that, our reincarnated hero asked the reason for so much hatred. After all, he was just an unemployed rank D. Matsubara replied that the reason was the fact that Meguru reminded him of someone from his past, a certain man from 100 years ago, whom he disliked greatly. Upon hearing the enemy's reasons, the protagonist revealed that the unemployed man Matsubara disliked was none other than himself. As he spoke, Meguru struck with his sword, charging at the red-bearded man with much energy emanating from his body. Matsubara was stunned, noticing that the style and presence were the same as the Meguru from 100 years ago. Without further doubt, he picked up his giant weapon and confronted Izumi. The two attacked each other, clashing their weapons in a confrontation of forces. When the protagonist retreated, his enemy called him weak, stating that he was nothing compared to what he had been hundreds of years ago. There was a stark difference in strength between Izumi and Matsubara at this moment. Our protagonist recognized that he would not be able to win without a plan, and he knew that the former hero's weakness lay in his own weight. More precisely, the piece of armor on his left shoulder, which appeared to be a magical item, amplified the energy in his body, making him much stronger in short bursts. This was the reason Matsubara could move with such agility despite his enormous build. However, Izumi was faster than his enemy, and so he decided to break the armor on his shoulder. Even being called weak by Matsubara, Izumi retorted that his opponent was letting his guard down, and then advanced with his sword, demonstrating his brutal speed. He passed the giant and attacked his left shoulder, cracking the armor. Matsubara, noticing Izumi's speed, attempted to deliver a hammer blow, slamming his giant weapon with full force into the ground. However, Izumi dodged and attacked from above. Positioning himself above Matsubara, he delivered a downward strike to his armor, further damaging the magical piece. Izumi then decided to question the brute before eliminating him for good. Knowing that Matsubara was gathering forces in Japan, he asked what the group's plans were, pointing his sword at the enemy's neck and demanding an answer. Matsubara laughed, finding it strange that Izumi didn't know the reason. He explained that Japan was a special place because of the sky dungeon that had disappeared 100 years ago. Even after using a portion of an incredible power to grant wishes, a lot of energy remained. Matsubara believed this energy should have been Izumi's reward, but after a long time, it had crystallized and was now hidden somewhere in Japan. If he could get his hands on this crystal, Matsubara would become much stronger than he already was, stating that he wasn't satisfied with just China under his control. He wanted the crystal to become superior to the other heroes, no matter how, so that the entire world would be his. However, the other heroes were also planning the same thing, and the moment the crystal was found, each of them would emerge from their hiding places to claim it. That's why Matsubara was gathering his forces. Izumi admitted that the enemy's motives were typical of him, but he considered the plan utterly worthless and advised Matsubara to give up on that dream, as it would never come true. Next, Izumi unleashed a sword attack, brimming with hatred and energy, intending to eliminate the brute, aiming a slash at his neck. Matsubara showed fear at first, but then claimed to have intercepted Izumi's attack, grabbing his sword and revealing that the armor on his left shoulder was not his weak point. He delivered a powerful punch to Izumi's stomach, sending him flying. As Izumi felt the pain of the blow, Kana screamed, fearing that Meguru, Izumi, would die. Matsubara, the former hero, said he had lived for a long time and compensated for his heavy muscles thanks to his armor, but now he no longer needed it to balance his weight. Removing his armor, he declared that Izumi was in trouble. Seeing him remove his armor, Izumi knew this fight wouldn't be easy. Nevertheless, he had been collecting items in recent days, acquiring potions and amulets, and intended to use them to ensure his safety. He still had many tricks up his sleeve that the enemy was unaware of. Izumi then said that Matsubara was very talkative today, and that he would make sure he wouldn't speak again. Knowing he had no chance of facing him head-on as he was now, Izumi planned something else. He used his sword to pierce the rocks, causing them to start falling on the villain, intending to push him into a more favorable situation. Next, he soaked the ground with water to then use another spell. Izumi knew that Matsubara wouldn't use the power he was so proud of in this unstable situation with the wet ground. Meanwhile, Izumi, being a jobless individual, could handle any situation and began to run. Even with the wet ground, he approached the enemy very quickly and used his fire magic. Using the explosive flames, he struck Matsubara and would be happy if that was enough to defeat him. However, Matsubara regained his energy and stated that the fight hadn't even begun yet. He emerged from the flames with his clothes slightly burned, but without a single scratch. Izumi realized that the only way to win was with a decisive attack. so he used an amulet. He dodged the giant hammer's blow, but Matsubara called him naive. Izumi then neutralized Matsubara's attack, using a magical barrier originating from the talisman. After blocking the blow, he grabbed his sacred sword and delivered a slash that made Matsubara fall. This being the last of his tricks, Izumi noted that it had worked in bringing down the enemy. Matsubara, still alive, declared that he hadn't even felt the pain of these attacks, which left Izumi a little worried. The enemy, Matsubara, scoffed, claiming that Meguru was only using cheap tricks and didn't possess enough strength to defeat him. With disdain, he added that this was all jobless class trash could do. Matsubara then observed the surroundings, noticing the mess the young hero had caused in his dungeon. At that instant, Matsubara himself, the former hero who now opposed Meguru, tidied up the dungeon with a simple magical gesture. Meguru was visibly surprised, to which the villain replied with a smug smile that this dungeon was his, and he controlled it completely. Without delay, Matsubara conjured a horde of monsters and a powerful spell, questioning if the hero would be equally surprised by what came next. Seeing various gargoyles and demons advancing towards him, Izumi promptly conjured fire magic to protect himself, beginning to attack the enemies with his flames. However, he was surprised by Matsubara's sudden presence behind him, who attacked him with his giant weapon. The brutal impact sent our protagonist flying through the air. The disparity in their attributes was so overwhelming that it left our hero without hope of victory. His mind, clouded by the impact, felt powerless before his greatest enemy, unable to react. What had happened hundreds of years ago seemed to be repeating itself at that very moment, plunging him into despair. A traumatic scene, the memory of his own death and that of his sister, haunted him. At this critical moment, a purple mark appeared on his hand, revealing the ability to consume the power of the crest. He discovered he could use the power of the crest of duty for only 30 seconds, but that didn't matter to him at that moment. Without hesitation, Meguru Izumi accepted the system's proposal, knowing that through it, he would become stronger. Immediately after his acceptance, his attack and speed stats soared to over 500. Thus, the moment the demons tried to attack him, he quickly prepared, unleashing a devastating slash that eliminated several monsters at once. Meguru felt an explosion of power coursing through his veins, and from that instant, the 5-minute countdown to use this strength began. Matsubara, surprised, questioned how Meguru possessed the crest's mark. He then revealed that after eliminating him in the Sky Dungeon, both he and others had received powers according to their desires, with Matsubara, for instance, gaining overwhelming stats and unique abilities. Deciding to stop talking, Matsubara showed he didn't care that the boy had grown stronger. He understood that the dungeon had recognized Meguru as if he had purified it, and thus granted him the mark. Though surprising, this did not alter his plan to try and eliminate the young hero at that moment. Our hero, with newfound confidence, retorted that Matsubara shouldn't be so certain of his victory, as he was now considerably stronger. In response, the enemy stomped his foot on the ground, destroying the surrounding environment with his brute force. Simultaneously, Matsubara charged a fire spell that resembled the sun itself and launched it towards Meguru. Upon seeing the fire spell radiating like the sun, Meguru froze it from a distance. The environment became icy, and he took the opportunity to cut a part of Matsubara's body with his sword, severing the enemy's arm, which fell to the ground, motionless. Izumi felt capable of moving effortlessly, his power seeming infinite. In that state, eliminating the villain would be an easy task. At this moment, Redbeard Matsubara knew true despair and began to beg for his life. This, however, only irritated our hero. After all, hundreds of years ago, Matsubara hadn't hesitated to eliminate him, even when he begged. Meguru's response would be the same. He began to conjure several enormous ice spikes. With Redbeard completely overcome by despair, our hero unleashed the spells, hurling an ice spear towards him, while the spikes began to pierce Matsubara's body. Thus, the villain was finally eliminated, and the revenge of our unemployed hero was concluded against his first target. The victory, however, was surprisingly disappointing, as the fight proved easier than Meguru had expected. The crest of power was replenished, and the power of duty expired, causing his stats to return to normal. Now, the mark on his hand had grown, and he understood that the power of duty was what he had gained by eliminating Saito. Meguru pondered that this mark might have some relation to the act of eliminating people. However, there was something more important to do: rescue his sister, Kana. Meguru ran desperately to her, removing her shackles. The girl, happy and relieved, embraced him. Kana, in turn, expressed her joy at being alive and apologized for having caused him trouble. Our protagonist reassured her, stating that she didn't need to worry, as she was his reason for living. Upon hearing this, the girl was stunned. Seeing that she wouldn't comprehend the depth of his words at that moment, Meguru changed the subject, deciding they should leave immediately. It was then that he realized there was no exit, and the ground began to tremble abruptly. The dungeon, created by Matsubara, was collapsing now that its master had been unlived. The situation was critical, as the entrance was very far from there. Meguru realized his mistake, fearing they would be buried alive, until an idea occurred to him. If the dungeon had been made with Matsubara's power, he could use the villain's sword. Activating the mark on his body, Meguru decided to employ the villain's own mana to get out of there alive. After all, mana was the soul of all dungeons and magic, and he set out to analyze the mana of that particular dungeon. As he observed the structure of the place and the mana that composed it, Meguru understood that only the dungeon master held complete control. However, since the sword he wielded belonged to Matsubara himself, he managed to sever the connection between the dungeon master and the environment. At that instant, Meguru cut the crystal that connected the mana to Matsubara's soul, opening an exit. He and his sister Kana began to run towards it as fast as possible. As soon as they managed to exit, Meguru realized they had narrowly escaped death. Kana, his sister, became desperate when he collapsed right after they got outside. Meguru woke up in the hospital for the second time in this world, noticing that the mana was gradually disappearing, just as it had before. Kana, his reincarnated sister, appeared and hugged him as soon as she realized he was awake, showing great happiness. Next, the protagonist received a visit from a nurse who wanted to perform a checkup. The young woman explained that he had suddenly collapsed and seemed to have had a very high fever, but was now in perfect health. Meguru thanked the doctors for their care, but was advised to spend the night in the hospital, and both agreed. He thought Kana must have struggled greatly to bring him there, considering his weight. The girl in turn said it was nothing much, and then decided to ask him some questions, inquiring what had happened between him and Matsubara for that whole fight to occur. Meguru didn't want to tell her the truth, but he felt he had no choice. He explained it was a long story, beginning to narrate about the hunters who challenged the sky dungeons. 8 S-rank hunters challenged a celestial dungeon. 6 of them emerged victorious and became S-level dungeon masters around the world. Later, they used their great power to conquer their respective continents. Kana knew Matsubara was one of them, and questioned what had happened to the 2 heroes who didn't return. The reincarnated girl had heard that the healer Kana of the past was eliminated protecting her comrades, but she didn't know much about the other hero, as few records of him remained in modern times. The hero stated that the person beside Kana was betrayed by their teammates, revealing that Matsubara and the other heroes eliminated both of them. The girl was stunned. Just as he was about to reveal that the last person was also named Meguru, he was interrupted by the appearance of Nozomi, who was shouting his name. Worried, she had rushed to the hospital as fast as possible upon learning he had collapsed and asked if he was all right. Our protagonist asked who had told her, and the girl said the association informed them. Then, he remembered that the hospital reported any records of hunters there to the association. He thanked her for coming so suddenly to check on his health. Kana grew jealous seeing the situation unfold before her, accusing him of being foolishly in love with the girl and showing her displeasure. Meguru told her that he had to protect Kana and couldn't have died before doing so. Kana then realized that he truly loved her. At that moment, the 2 girls looked at each other with conflicting gazes, a rivalry for the man. Our protagonist didn't understand what was wrong with them to suddenly hate each other. He felt he couldn't continue talking about the dark past at that moment, as it wasn't the right time. His revenge was only just beginning. For now, he would put it aside. He wanted to spend the rest of his days surrounded by love. The girls then left, leaving the protagonist alone in the hospital. Everything suddenly became so quiet that he decided to watch TV for some noise. He noticed Matsubara was on television, giving an interview, and wondered how that was possible, since he had eliminated Matsubara. Inside a B-level dungeon, Meguru began to face several monsters. Alongside him were Nozomi and Kana, who helped him confront the giant wolves. Nozomi, with her enormous sword, managed to eliminate several creatures, assisting the protagonist. He thought this was perfect for returning to the natural balance of things. After their victory in this dungeon, they gained many attribute points. Nozomi had been quite uncertain since leaving the hospital, but her worries proved unfounded. Our hero still wondered how Matsubara was alive after being eliminated in the dungeon. He had shown all the tricks he had the day before and knew that things wouldn't be easier anymore. They decided to leave that B-level dungeon, where they were gaining experience. As soon as they exited, they went to the Shinjuku Hunter Association building. The secretary thanked them for their hard work, and the branch leader wanted to speak with Meguru. While they talked in China, Matsubara was seen alive and irritated about something. Unable to believe he had had been defeated. He looked at the mark on his body and thought that if he hadn't used it to separate his soul from his body, he would have died. At that moment, a man desperately entered his room, unable to believe he was alive. Matsubara, still irritated by his defeat, decided to let his guard down for now, as he had anticipated this possibility and saw no issue with it. He stated that it wouldn't be a problem, as he would now seek entertainment and observe his people. His secretary, however, suggested it would be more prudent to rest until the crystal regenerated. Even with his soul crystal shattered, Matsubara shouted, reiterating that it wouldn't be a problem. Matsubara then went out into the streets, observing the Chinese people in their daily activities. An excited little girl tried to speak with him. While the child was excited, her mother quickly asked her daughter not to be rude. In a completely brutal manner, Matsubara kicked the child, who fainted, leaving her mother in despair. Shortly after, he headed to a nightlife establishment, but couldn't find any excitement there, stating that if Meguru hadn't returned to life, none of this would be happening. Suddenly, something caught everyone's attention in the nightclub. It was the arrival of a fat man who, without hesitation, strangled Matsubara's secretary and a little girl. The girl was the heroine Futaba Mizuho, who had found Matsubara's real body, and the fat man was the summoning hero Hidaka Asehi. Both were immediately recognized by Matsubara, the red-bearded one. Futaba stated that it had been 70 years since they last met, and criticized the weak security of the place, saying that Matsubara was underestimating them. Matsubara, in turn, asked what they wanted and why they had invaded his territory. The heroine revealed that he never imagined two of the 6 heroes would become so strong, and that targeting the weakest among them made perfect sense to them at that moment. Hidaka Asehi then summoned skeletons from a portal, which immediately began to attack Matsubara. The chubby man with glasses, Hidaka, provoked, stating that Matsubara was exhausted and very careless over the past 70 years, while they, in that same period, had grown and strengthened much more. He added that as long as the situation was changing, improvements were inevitable, and that Matsubara only needed to change in the correct way. After Hidaka's provocation, the skeletons immobilized the old hero. At the same time, Futaba Mizuho approached him from behind, touched his head, and said goodbye. When Matsubara turned, he saw a whirlwind of flames and was eliminated by the girl. Futaba was certain she could have eliminated him easily and alone. The chubby summoner, however, pondered that if Matsubara hadn't been so exhausted, he could indeed have turned the tables on Futaba had she been alone. Futaba asked if that was all the chubby hero needed. In response, Hidaka said he had everything he wanted as he began to absorb Matsubara's body. Hidaka stated that now was the time to save the rotten world, and Matsubara, the red-bearded one, transformed into one of his summons. Meanwhile, elsewhere, at the meeting with the head of the Hunters Association, the reincarnated Meguru asked what the chief wanted. The chief wished to speak about Meguru and his relationship with Matsubara, but made sure to state that he wasn't suspecting him. According to his investigation, the 6 heroes possessed the same crest that granted special abilities. There was a wide variety in these abilities, but the only way for Matsubara, the red-bearded one, to be alive now was because of it. When he fought someone stronger, he always fled thanks to the power of this mark. Meguru thought this made the explanation shorter, and began to tell the chief everything. After hearing everything, the chief concluded that Meguru was stronger than he had imagined, especially for having defeated Matsubara. He explained that the tyranny of the old heroes was extreme, and fortunately, Japan had not yet been conquered. However, as long as they existed, the world could easily end up living a nightmare. Therefore, the head of the association wanted to establish true peace in the world. He extended his hand to Meguru and proposed that they work together. In Japan's current circumstances, there was nothing to fear except occasional monsters, and this peace was attributed to the power and influence of the 6 heroes. The chief questioned what made Japan so special above any other country. He explained that it was a special country for the heroes, as it was their homeland and where the Sky Dungeon had appeared. 100 years ago, this dungeon was conquered by 8 people, including the heroes. After the dungeon's collapse, its hardened mana transformed into the crystals they currently knew. These hardened mana crystals spread throughout Japan, and apparently, the heroes were constantly searching for them. Meguru then remembered that Matsubara was indeed looking for one of these crystals. He questioned why, if they wanted them so badly, they hadn't collected them over the last century. The chief replied that the heroes' attributes as dungeon masters were getting in the way. This was the best hypothesis. After all, they had received immortality, eternal bodies, and great power. But if one were to think about it, this also implied that they had simultaneously received restrictions. The wavelength of mana emitted by the heroes in their dungeons was the same. They weren't just commanding dungeons, they had become part of them. Thinking about it, Meguru recalled Matsubara mentioning his soul being one with the location. Therefore, if the dungeons they commanded were destroyed, they would perish along with them. This possibility seemed real to Meguru, as the heroes bound to the dungeons wouldn't be able to move if the location wasn't in order. All the evidence pointed to this conclusion, although it was still just speculation. Observing the situation with the former hero, Meguru knew that more dungeons would emerge, and the association chief requested his help. Naturally, he would be rewarded, and the chief promised to give him anything he desired, be it money, status, or confidential information. Meguru then asked for permission to be the first to enter B rank or higher dungeons across the country. To achieve the strength he aimed for, he needed to clear as many locations as possible and collect their rewards. The association chief promptly agreed, expressing great anticipation for the fruits of this new partnership. The protagonist then asked the chief not to reveal anything to Kana, even if they worked together. He felt that this time, it would be easier to protect her if she were closer to him, as he couldn't do everything he wanted if she wasn't by his side constantly. Furthermore, he needed to think about how to protect her while fighting the remaining heroes. The chief, however, pondered that only 2 people would be insufficient to face 6 heroes, suggesting that Meguru join other powerful hunters. Meguru, who hadn't considered such a possibility, revealed that he had a specific person in mind for his team. That person was Nozomi. Nozomi was happy to be called, but imposed a condition. She wanted Hikari and Sakura to join as well. Breaking her expectations, Meguru made it clear that he only wanted her presence, without the others. The reason was his certainty that the 2 would perish if they joined the team, as Nozomi was by far the strongest among them, and the others would only hinder them. The best he could expect from them would be a sacrifice to keep Kana safe, a prospect he was unwilling to accept, as he didn't want to invite someone to the group knowing that person would die. Nozomi, in turn, refused the proposal, arguing that it would be a betrayal of her 2 companions. Although she very much wanted to help Meguru, she would never betray her friends. Upset, she stood up and called Hikari and Sakura to leave. At that moment, Sakura intervened, addressing Izumi Meguru with a proposal. Wanting to support Nozomi, they knew they couldn't keep up with her level. Even so, they had been best friends and hunters in the same group for years, and therefore couldn't separate. They then asked for a chance to prove their usefulness, stating that if they failed, they would disband the group with Nozomi. Nozomi heard all of this and said that they couldn't decide on their own. The girls then confronted Nozomi, and the protagonist, observing their determination, accepted the proposal. Seeing that they were willing to go so far, he would give them this chance. They headed to an abandoned warehouse where Meguru ensured no one would disturb them. There, he challenged them to attack him simultaneously, on the condition that he wouldn't take a single step. If they forced him to move, he would accept them onto his team. The 2 agreed, and Hikari charged forward with everything she had, preparing a strike. However, as she approached for the attack, she hesitated, fearing she might hurt him. Meguru, noticing her hesitation, assured them that they didn't need to hold back just because he was unarmed. He instructed them to try and take him down for real. Hikari then charged forward with all her might, attacking from top to bottom with her weapon, while Sakura, at the same time, attempted a surprise attack from behind. Meguru noted that they displayed excellent teamwork, a result of a long partnership. They attacked together again, unleashing ice magic and physical attacks with their weapons, until, with a swift movement, Meguru threw Hikari away and cast a spell on Sakura, who was shocked by the surprise. After throwing them aside and clearly defeating them, he asked if that was all they could do. The girls, however, faced him with renewed vigor and promptly got up to continue their assault. He noticed their unwavering determination as they charged forward with everything for another attack. However, they faced a giant mountain to climb, a barrier that couldn't be overcome alone. Quickly, he knocked them to the ground once more, remaining motionless in his original spot. Defeated, the 2 concluded that, in fact, they would only hinder the team by being weak. They apologized to Nozomi for not being able to keep up with her pace and, consequently, not being able to remain on the team. They knew they had no chance, and that the challenge was, in fact, a way to say goodbye to Nozomi. Nozomi, emotional, thanked them and suggested they eat cake together when they were free. She expressed her wish that they would become strong, and that one day they could work together again. Although their team might have disbanded at that moment, the 3 would always be best friends. In a tight embrace, they They cried with emotion. Meguru, the protagonist, knew they were determined and recognized that they had endured for too long. They might not be strong enough now, but one day he was sure they would be. Suddenly, our hero received a mysterious call. Upon answering, he heard someone calling him desperately. The urgent message revealed that Hidaka and Futaba, two of the 6 heroes, were on their way to Japan. Upon hearing the news of the arrival of 2 of the 6 heroes, he was shocked and consumed by a deep hatred. 100 years prior, inside the dungeon in the sky, after the demise of the original protagonist and his sister, Matsubara was furious. They had cleared the last dungeon, but their wishes were not granted. Opening the system window, which explained about the crystal to be collected, he learned that by collapsing the dungeon, they could obtain the crystal by collecting its fragments scattered across Japan. Any wish would be granted upon obtaining the crystal, and they would become dungeon masters. The first dungeon they reached would be under their control, and they would gain eternal life. Furthermore, they would receive the crest mark, elevated attributes, and a unique skill. However, if they didn't control a dungeon within the next 72 hours, they would perish. Matsubara, the chubby one, understood that only one of them would have their wish granted upon obtaining the final crystal, which meant the heroes would become enemies from that moment on. Shirashi Hokuto, the hero knight, found the situation interesting, while the hero Tsurumi Yakumo, the archer, noticed there were more additional explanations. The fragments were hardened dungeon mana and had spread across the country, detectable from a distance by their mana signature. The hero mage Kawasaki Masato thought the system was providing too much information. Futaba, for her part, realized she couldn't even take a picture of the information to remember it later. Matsubara didn't want to read everything, only understanding the part about him being the sole collector of the crystal. He thought he could take all the time he wanted in the search, as long as he eliminated the others first. Without bothering to read the full text, he left for China, thinking it would be the best option due to its proximity to Japan. Tsurumi, however, didn't think China offered advantageous terrain, and considered it foolish for Matsubara to leave without reading the text. After reading everything, the others understood that only one of them could become a god in the new world, and those who did not become an entity would be eliminated. Judging by the description of the crystal fragments, they couldn't be gathered overnight. Ultimately, the knight Shirashi understood that they would have to face each other until one of them was eliminated, no matter where they established their bases, as the fight would be inevitable. Tsurumi knew the situation would only be different if someone gathered the crystal fragments very quickly. Hidaka couldn't think of any way to gather multiple fragments at once, until he had an idea and, for some reason, thought of Futaba. Hidaka then formed a partnership with her, saying they wouldn't need to fight until only the 2 of them remained. He pleaded with her to stop wasting time taking photos, but the girl replied that it wasn't a waste. She explained that she had a great plan to gather the crystal fragments and needed time for it. Futaba told him to do everything himself, and he asked her to be less irrational. The girl insisted that she only wanted to take her photos, and that he should accept her request. Then, she cast a spell on him that made Hidaka obey her, asking only that she be brief with the photos. Internally, he knew that the price for Futaba's help was high, but he was willing to deal with it. He couldn't harm her, and furthermore, he had to obey all her requirements, which would be enforced if he ever tried to break the agreement. Returning to the present, our hero reacted in shock upon learning of the arrival of these 2 heroes. He would receive more details soon, but Hidaka and Futaba were now a higher priority than Matsubara. All that changed was the order in which our protagonist would eliminate the heroes. Furthermore, the boss ordered him to come to the association immediately, as he had something to give him. Arriving at the Hunters Association branch, the trio followed the boss to a room, entering a warehouse to receive their gift. The boss stated that, due to the heroes' strength, they needed good weapons to fight them, showing all the weapons in the warehouse and asserting that they were free to take whichever they desired. Our hero picked up a large sword with a blue blade, and the boss had expected this from him. This sword was worth about 20 million on the market, and was the most expensive item they possessed there. Meguru stated that the sword was good, but it would soon cease to be enough for him. Therefore, he thought it better to stick with Saito's weapon, and asked if that was the best they could offer. The boss replied that, for now, it was, and that they needed special materials to strengthen these weapons. Soon, Meguru could have better weapons, provided he brought the necessary materials. A massive amount of mana was present in the dungeons, and the Philosopher's Stone could be useful for fortifying weapons. Our protagonist was unaware of this function of the Philosopher's Stone. His boss said that with an A-level stone, they could improve weapons for all three of them. Meguru thought he could handle it, but he wished Kana and Nozomi had good weapons. Ultimately, he understood that they only needed to acquire a Philosopher's Stone to reach the pinnacle of weaponry, although it was naturally difficult for a rank A dungeon to appear out of nowhere. He had no idea when he would get the chance to find a rank A dungeon, but his boss revealed that dungeons of that level had recently been discovered in central Tokyo. Upon hearing that one had appeared the day before, the protagonist questioned what had emerged in Shibuya. No one knew the exact reason, but dragon veins had been active recently, and this seemed to be the cause behind these phenomena. Sometime later on the subway, Nozomi told them about her search for Futaba Mizuho. She discovered that Futaba was deeply involved in something, having forced all her people to follow her and like her Instagram posts. Those who forgot to interact with her content were punished, as were women and men considered more attractive than her. Despite this, Futaba freely distributed the profits from oil fields, which made her quite popular, and she seemed dedicated to cultivating likes on her social media. Meanwhile, Nichitaka Asahi seemed to have recently been put in charge of political purges, being the type of man who never spoke about political matters. At worst, they should let things happen, as he couldn't simply bother them. As for the reincarnated Meguru, Kana believed Matsubara was the only one who knew the truth. She asked if our hero knew these people, and he replied that he hadn't seen them in 100 years. When questioned about what kind of people they were, the protagonist was never able to say. He decided to hide from the girl that she was the reincarnated Kana from the past, but then explained to Nozomi that he was a reincarnation of the hero Meguru from the past. A week before heading to the Sky Dungeon, they met with 6 heroes to learn how to fight together. The 2 arrived at the location and found the other 6 heroes who would be part of their team. Matsubara was polite upon meeting our hero, who reciprocated in kind. Together, they entered an A-rank dungeon and faced some monsters. Matsubara applauded Meguru's skills, highlighting how the unemployed class was very useful in combat. Futaba, in turn, noticed that besides being handsome, he was strong and thought of him as a potential boyfriend. At that moment, she went to speak with the protagonist asking if he was dating anyone. Our protagonist liked to avoid things that could cause him problems later, so he replied that he was seeing someone and ignored her. Upon seeing this scene, Futaba became very angry that he had treated her that way. Believing the woman he was seeing was Kana, she wondered what made her so special. Soon, she began to look at Kana with anger and jealousy, admitting that she was beautiful and stylish. The heroes were all fighting together to conquer the A-level dungeon until Futaba, on purpose, pushed the healer Kana, knocking her to the ground. She apologized afterward, and the chubby man helped her up. However, he soon began placing his hand on inappropriate parts of the girl. Meguru saw and stopped him, angrily questioning what he was doing and glaring fiercely at the chubby man with glasses. Matsubara, seeing a potential fight, asked everyone to stand side by side without quarreling. Kana asked him to calm down, as she was fine, and the protagonist promised not to stay away from her again. Meguru didn't want to give the details, but said that heroes had always been true to their desires. He felt he couldn't judge them, considering he was seeking revenge, which was not a noble pursuit. Upon arriving at central Tokyo, in the A-level dungeon, the trio noticed that the monsters had already been defeated. Imagining someone had arrived there before them, they noticed an open door. As soon as Meguru opened the door, he saw a giant scorpion with lightning around its body. He also noticed the presence of Futaba and Hidaka, wondering how they had gotten there. Futaba and Hidaka didn't recognize our hero, and he remembered that they wouldn't, as his appearance had changed after his reincarnation. Furthermore, they didn't notice the presence of the 2 girls on his team. Meguru told the 2 girls to leave that place immediately, and they obeyed. He didn't know why the 2 heroes were there and already gripped his sword. He thought about attacking them by surprise, but calmed down, as it was still too early and he needed to get closer to them. He walked towards them and asked what they were doing there. The 2 asked if the boy was a hunter. After he replied that he wasn't yet, Futaba said they had already eliminated the giant scorpion boss. Meguru said ironically that they were very strong for having defeated the final boss of an A-level dungeon. He waited for the perfect moment and then suddenly launched a fireball at the 2 without any warning. Hidaka grabbed Futaba, pulling her out of the way to help her dodge the surprise attack that almost hit them. Enraged, the protagonist charged at them with his special sword. In response, Hidaka summoned several skeletons, which were defeated instantly by the reincarnated one. The chubby man told Futaba to calm down, as the man in front of them was not ordinary. Kana, disobeying her brother, called out his name in front of the two heroes. Immediately, the heroine recognized Akabane Kana from 100 years ago. She didn't understand what was happening until Hidaka realized they had called him Meguru. Hidaka, observing the way Meguru moved and used his sword and magic, as well as the fact that he attacked two strangers without hesitation, concluded something important. Understanding the situation, he told Futaba to leave with him, stating that they couldn't make a scene and eliminate Meguru under the current conditions. However, Futaba replied that she didn't care, declaring that her priority was to eliminate Kana. She insisted she would eliminate her even if she had nothing to do with the Akabane Kana of the past, because her face and demeanor irritated her, reminding her of past events. Furthermore, she planned to eliminate the other woman, Nozomi, simply because she could. Hidaka realized that when angry, Futaba wouldn't listen to anything he said, and if she cast a command spell, he wouldn't be able to disobey her. Faced with Futaba's stubbornness, Hidaka, the chubby man with glasses, granted her 30 seconds to finish the combat, suggesting it would be even better if she finished sooner. He stated that she was strong enough to win in such a short time. When Hidaka asked if he was placing too much expectation on her, Futaba got annoyed but guaranteed she would be quick. Meanwhile, Nozomi was terrified to discover that the two enemies were part of the 6 legendary heroes. Meguru confirmed the information, stating that there was no other option but to end the matter right there. Futaba advanced with full force, and the protagonist prepared for the attack, thinking he would be the target. However, the heroine conjured a spell and aimed it at Kana. Meguru promptly stepped in front, receiving the attack and realizing he could barely defend against her blows. Meguru noticed that Futaba was aiming at Kana, but Nozomi, confident, stated that he could handle it. Next, Nozomi charged a very fast attack and lunged at the enemy with all her might. Futaba, seeing the blow up close, admitted that Nozomi was better than she thought. However, immediately afterward, she dodged and launched her counterattack, a powerful spell. Declaring that the girl was far below her level, Futaba hit Nozomi squarely, defeating her. She even boasted about being stronger and more beautiful, because she belonged to the first class of hunters. Now, Futaba prepared to focus on Kana and Meguru, but she was interrupted by her colleague, Hidaka, who announced that the 30 seconds had already passed and that they would be leaving through a portal. Before leaving, Futaba warned that although she had let them leave alive that day, next time she promised to eliminate Kana. Meguru felt weak, frustrated that he hadn't even managed to touch Futaba, and seeing Nozomi unconscious. When Nozomi, still dazed, finally asked who those two were and why they knew Kana, finding it all very strange, Meguru saw no other option but to tell them the whole truth. He stated that he wasn't the only one to reincarnate into another body, revealing that Kana had also gone through the same experience. He explained that she and he were exact copies of the past heroes, Meguru and Kana, which was why the two heroes recognized them by name. Meguru regretted not being able to show a comparison, as the photos from 100 years ago had been lost, but he assured them there was no way he could mistake his younger sister in someone else's body. Now, Kana finally understood why Meguru had said he cared so much about her. Meguru reiterated that he cared deeply for her, as she was part of his precious family, and it was precisely because they had harmed Kana in the past that he would never forgive them, vowing to himself that he would eliminate all of them with his own hands. Nozomi and Kana were left speechless. Upon arriving home, Kana remained thoughtful, understanding that she was the reason Izumi, Meguru, was so connected to the 6 heroes and wanted to eliminate them. Meguru, for his part, thought the shock had been too great for Kana. At that moment, their door knocked in the middle of the night. Meguru went to answer it, asking his sister to go to sleep in the meantime, and she obeyed. Opening the door, Meguru noticed Nozomi, who had come to their house to talk with Kana. Nozomi stated that she would borrow the girl for a bit, and the two left the house for a walk. Seeing that it was raining and already night, Meguru thought they could have stayed inside. Nozomi asked Kana if she was bothered by Meguru caring for her like a younger sister. Kana replied that it no longer bothered her, as she had understood the situation. For her, as long as they stayed together, their relationship didn't matter. What truly bothered her was Meguru's guilt and his obsession with revenge, which worried her deeply. She believed that if he weren't so obsessed with revenge, they could be living in peace. Furthermore, she felt she had ruined any chance of giving him a peaceful life, and she was certain that her previous self wouldn't have wanted him to seek revenge. Nozomi said she understood how Izumi, Meguru, felt, because if anyone from their group or her friends were to be struck down, and she couldn't do anything to protect them, she would feel terrible. She thought she would be lost in rage, obliterate the culprit, and become obsessed, no matter what anyone said. Kana then thought about how she would feel if Meguru were to die, and if she would react the same way. After agreeing with Nozomi, Kana concluded that Izumi had nothing else on his mind but her, and that even Kana's entry into the group must have been to ensure her well-being. Kana believes she wants Nozomi to sacrifice herself for her when the time comes, because alone, she wouldn't be able to fight at her full strength, risking death. After reflecting, Kana concluded that it was all right. She wanted to accept this possibility, as she understood the pain of losing a loved one. However, Kana wished to be useful to Meguro Izumi, no matter the form. Furthermore, she was certain that he would defeat the heroes and stated that Meguro needed her buffs and heals to fight effectively. This was a valid premise for any hunter team. It was common sense to do everything to protect the healer. Therefore, Kana decided not to mind Meguro protecting her, viewing it as mutual aid, and felt happy to be able to assist him. The next day, Kana and Nozomi discussed an urgent dungeon awaiting Meguro. Nozomi stated that they should leave immediately, and then questioned Kana about her wishes. Kana still harbored the desire to make him give up his revenge, but she knew he wouldn't change his mind. Faced with this, she pretended that everything was fine and expressed her wish to accompany them on the mission. Upon arriving, they spotted a portal in the middle of the street, a location they considered inconvenient, as people couldn't access the shop located behind the portal. For this reason, the boss had requested that the dungeon be cleared on the same day. Meguro, the hero, wished to be quick and obtain the Philosopher's Stone mentioned by the branch manager. Thus, they entered the dungeon, and inside it seemed quite normal. They even thought it was easier than common dungeons, finding the final boss door very quickly and without any difficulties along the way. Meguro noticed that the dungeon's layout was excessively simple. Just as Nozomi advanced, Meguro spotted a trap and warned her. However, she ended up stepping on it, but thanks to her magical armor, the trap didn't harm her. Meguro noticed that it was only needles that were launched, which he found disappointing. Using his search ability, Meguro realized that the needles couldn't be seen with the naked eye, emerging from within the walls when certain points were crossed. Upon seeing the giant needles, Nozomi commented that no one would notice them the first time they were there. Meguro explained that A-level dungeons always had tricks, and this one was no exception. Suddenly, two pumpkin-like monsters appeared. Meguro created ice stakes and hurled them, eliminating the monsters with great ease. Nozomi understood that they would have to deal with monsters and traps simultaneously. Meguro stated that such weak enemies posed no threat, no matter their numbers, as long as they didn't use tricks. Then, he conjured a powerful fire spell and launched it against the monsters, defeating several at once. He asked Nozomi to attract as many monsters as possible, while Kana was to focus on healing her teammate. Nozomi, the pink-haired girl, grabbed her sword and declared that she would take care of Meguru's younger sister. She charged at the monsters with full force, while Kana, the blonde, cast healing spells. Nozomi did a good job attracting the monsters, and Kana noted that while healing magic took time, it was easy to apply in this situation. Meguro began to energize his arm with shock magic and approached one of the pumpkins, placing his hand on it and using his lightning magic. He thanked the two for giving him time to conjure his spells, and thus they won with ease. Nozomi noticed that when Meguro focused on offense, the combat ended very quickly. She observed the pumpkins, all burned and destroyed by Meguru's lightning magic, and stated that she wanted to make fights easier for him. However, she didn't possess enough defense to be his vanguard, and asked how to deal with stronger opponents. Meguro knew that Nozomi's defense couldn't be increased overnight, as it was limited by her class. He considered the solution of increasing her agility. After all, it wouldn't matter how strong the target's attacks were if none of them could hit her. Meguro stated that he possessed a spell that allowed a person to move more quickly, and given their current situation, he decided to teach something to Kana. An hour after their training, they entered the final boss room. The boss was a giant, furious pumpkin, against which they would practice what they had learned. Nozomi, who had learned to increase her speed in movement and attacks, advanced with great rapidity, while Kana, in turn, had learned a poison spell that drained the target's vitality. Nozomi managed to defend the boss's attack with her shield, which thrilled her. While she bought time acting as the vanguard, Meguro took charge of the rest of the combat. He launched a giant ice stake that eliminated the boss and congratulated Nozomi for her assistance. After defeating the creature, they finally acquired the Philosopher's Stone. In a scene transition, Futaba and Hidaka were seen at a theme park in Chiba Prefecture. Hidaka apologized for disrupting Futaba's fun day, but explained that the day of their plan was drawing near. Futaba, aware that Hidaka had planned everything alone, expressed a desire to review the details. He, in turn, explained the complexity of his plan, which involved crystals buried throughout Japan, requiring a complete scan of the country. However, he revealed that the newly acquired Philosopher's Stone could be the key to gathering all the crystals at once. The problem, Hidaka warned, was that this action would make them stand out, and the collection process would take a considerable amount of time. He feared that the interference of any powerful hunter in the country could destabilize the plan, leading to its failure. Futaba immediately understood that he was referring specifically to Meguro Izumi, and it it was then that Hidaka revealed his strategy, to fake the hunter's death. Given the uncertainty of what was to come, both of them needed to be ready to fight at any moment. The girl reacted with a silly expression, while Hidaka, serious, reiterated that he was counting on her for the success of the endeavor. Meanwhile, at the Hunters Association warehouse, the branch chief was taking the most expensive sword they possessed. Meguru, the protagonist, understood that the stronger the base weapon, the greater the power it would gain. He knew it would be more advantageous to use that sword with its intrinsic bonuses than any other weapon he possessed. His branch chief also noticed that the two girls, Nozomi and Kana, had already chosen their respective weapons. Next, they changed locations, following the branch chief to the second underground floor of the association, where he explained that it was the Red Laboratory. There, they developed the equipment that manifested monsters for the promotional exam. A scientist then used the extremely strong blue sword and the Philosopher's Stone to fortify it. At the end of the process, Meguru observed that the weapon's appearance hadn't changed at all. However, he decided to test it, promising to go easy since they were in an enclosed space. He delivered a light downward slash, and the sword unleashed an incredibly potent mana trail. This startled the entire group, but left the branch chief excited. Meguru realized that the sword had become much stronger, and that technology had advanced enormously from one century to the next. He understood that the spells utilizing the Philosopher's Stone's energy contained a new discovery from only 5 years ago, meaning the heroes were still unaware of this innovation. The only way to increase his stats, Meguru thought, was by clearing the dungeons all at once. For that, he would need enough firepower to fight against those two ancient heroes. Fortunately, thanks to Nozomi's new shield, she could withstand damage more effectively, and Kana, with her new staff, would be able to significantly reduce spellcasting time. The branch chief expressed a desire to do more for our hero, but Meguru stated that it was already sufficient. Now, he wanted to test his soul as quickly as possible, and the branch chief promptly offered to prepare a rank B monster for him. While on a phone call stating he would return the call later, the branch chief asked Meguru, the reincarnated one, to remain calm upon hearing some rather heavy news. He revealed that monsters had started to emerge from Matsubara's dungeon in Shanghai. Immediately, Meguru understood that Matsubara had been eliminated, which was why the monsters were escaping his dungeon. Although he wanted to find out what had happened, the priority now was to eliminate the monsters. If the situation were left as it was, the swarm would spread throughout Japan as well, meaning Meguru had to conquer an S-rank dungeon as quickly as possible. The cause was secondary, but the biggest problem was the flood of monsters in the area. Meguru was willing to take down an S-rank dungeon right then, because since the dungeon master had been defeated, there was a high chance of his dungeon collapsing. The chief would very much like to borrow Meguru's strength, but he didn't want to force him. However, he didn't even need to. As our hero stated, he would go there to resolve the situation. After all, if they didn't go, no one else could solve it. It was a major problem, and if left unchecked, Japan would suffer damage, putting Kana's safety at risk. They took a private jet flight, and 3 hours later, they were over Shanghai. They were preparing to land when they noticed the runway was ruined, making landing impossible. Our protagonist unbuckled his seatbelt and said that location was fine, leading the others to think he would parachute down. However, he descended without a parachute, with Kana in his arms, and Nozomi jumped out as well. Then, they activated anti-gravity magic and landed gently without a harsh impact. Nozomi thought she was going to die, and Meguru apologized, explaining he hadn't had time to detail his plan. He noticed that the local hunters were quite weak and were having difficulty facing the beasts. Even in large numbers, they would be at a disadvantage, as the monsters were very strong coming from an S-rank dungeon. For now, he would clear everything himself, conjuring several spells at once. A rain of ice began to fall, and the spikes pierced the monsters, eliminating them. The monsters began to disappear, just like dungeons do when they are cleared. More importantly, Meguru asked if the local hunters understood the situation. Even without knowing the reason, the hunters believed Matsubara was releasing the monsters on purpose, recalling that this had happened 20 years ago when the national uprising was suppressed. Our protagonist knew that the former red-bearded hero was doing something heinous. Despite everything, panic spread among the people, fueled by misinformation. Meguru, however, clarified that the current situation was distinct, as Matsubara had been eliminated. The hunters, incredulous at the news of his defeat, tried to question Izumi. She explained that, in reality, there were two sources of magic, one from the body and another from the dungeon, and she was only detecting one of them. This indicated that the dungeon master had disappeared, the location was collapsing, and consequently, the monsters were leaking out. The hunters, however, refused refused to believe until they could witness the truth with their own eyes. It was at that exact moment that Matsubara appeared, attempting to ambush Meguru. At the last second, the hero managed to draw his sword and defend against the giant hammer's blow. The red-bearded man, Matsubara, declared that the truth was he was alive, right there, in front of everyone. Seeing him attack, the girls were shocked by the fact that he was alive. They remembered that monsters were scattered because the dungeon master had disappeared. However, that didn't make sense since Matsubara was alive. Without hesitation, Meguru stated that he would deal with him first and only then think about why all of this was happening. Immediately, Matsubara advanced with a blow from his giant hammer, but the hero dodged with agility. Provoking him, Meguru commented that he seemed less precise than before. The red-bearded man vehemently denied it. Meguru, for his part, knew that having fought him recently, it was impossible to have forgotten his movements. His own attributes had definitely improved since that day, and his weapon was much stronger. While Meguru was deep in thought, his enemy advanced again with the hammer, seeking to accelerate the fight. Meguru defended with his enhanced sword, surprising his enemy. Izumi, although not fully understanding the situation, stated that Matsubara seemed weaker compared to their previous confrontation. Meguru then declared that he would end the fight with the next hit and began to charge red magic in his hands. The enemy, for his part, said he had no other option but to use his special trick. Meguru, thinking he was just stalling with idle talk, retorted that it wouldn't work. He then unleashed his extremely potent fire magic, which exploded over Matsubara. At that exact moment, two identical clones of him appeared before him. Nozomi found it strange that there were 3 versions of Matsubara in the same place. Kana, in turn, feared she wouldn't be able to distinguish which was the original Matsubara. Our hero tried to understand when the enemy had acquired such an ability. Soon, the 2 clones began to replicate the same abilities Meguru was using. One of them advanced with powerful sword attacks, while the other charged fire magic. Meguru, however, noticed that although the technique was the same, the strength of the blows seemed weaker than before. Dealing with multiple opponents was, for him, a real headache. Suddenly, a fire attack came his way, and he realized he wouldn't be able to dodge in time. Therefore, he responded using the same magic, but with a much greater intensity, obliterating the enemies. Quickly, he recovered and assured his team that he was fine, without a scratch. At the same time, the clones also remained alive and unharmed. At that instant, Meguru noticed that the marks on the clones' hands were different. The patterns of the emblems on the clones had changed. All these inconsistencies led him to assume that the Matsubara in front of him was fake, and suddenly, everything made sense. He recalled that Hidaka Asahi possessed the ability to summon creatures at will. Hidaka was summoning mimics that took human forms. Therefore, after eliminating the real Matsubara, Hidaka had created a clone of him. The emblem of power that allowed copying appearances and techniques was what was visible on the clone's hands. However, Meguru knew that Hidaka couldn't copy a person's current attributes. At that moment, Meguru bit his finger, allowing his vital fluids to flow over the mark of power. A heavy energy began to emanate from him, and he instructed the girls to follow him. The strength of the duplicates was proportional to the amount of magic Hidaka had infused into them. When they split into 2, they became weaker, dividing their attributes in half. This was the opportunity Meguru needed to handle the fight. He shouted for Nozomi to act, and the girl charged at the duplicates. With her sword, she unleashed a spinning slash. In response, one of the clones cast an ice spell, while the other charged with its sword. Upon receiving the sword strike, Nozomi used her shield to defend herself, but found herself in a difficult situation. Watching everything from a distance, Kana began to prepare a poison spell. Once the poison took hold of one of the duplicates, it started to feel weaker. At that moment, Meguru seized the opportunity to attack that duplicate from behind with his sword. Disarming the clone, he commented that if it had been the real Matsubara, he would have been able to predict that action and react accordingly. Then, he pierced the duplicate's heart with his weapon, finally eliminating one of them. Our hero said that he had only managed to do all this thanks to the 2 of them and thanked them. At that instant, Izumi cast a fire spell towards the duplicate, which was immediately eliminated and vanished. He felt a pang of satisfaction for having resolved the situation, but soon the happiness gave way to a persistent unease. Izumi tried to understand why Hidaka had created those duplicates. Finally, he decided it was time to stop overthinking, and, along with Kana and Nozomi, they headed towards the S-rank dungeon. Kana and Nozomi had never set foot in a dungeon of that level, nor witnessed so many different types of monsters gathered in one place. However, Izumi quickly demonstrated that for them, those creatures posed no great threat, defeating them with remarkable ease. Although the girls initially thought that only he possessed such a level of strength, they soon realized that they too could keep pace and deal with the beasts. The The creatures present there were as strong and resilient as those they had faced outside, but thanks to their new weapons and the high performance demanded of their users, the group was able to overcome them. The mere fact that they were fighting there side by side was proof that they had become much stronger, and Kana and Nozomi felt a wave of contentment. Kana, however, felt a little left behind, but Izumi promptly reassured her, stating that she too had greatly raised her level and was equally strong. Finally, the group opened the door to the final boss, encountering an imposing demon covered in robust armor. Without hesitation, Nozomi advanced quickly, unleashing a leap and a powerful sword attack. The demon, however, counterattacked fiercely, forcing the girl to interrupt her strike and dodge backward. Nozomi realized she had captured the attention of the creature, which resembled a giant gargoyle, and Izumi seized the opportunity to cast his ice spell, seeking to aid his companion. However, to everyone's surprise, the creature didn't even flinch when the ice projectiles hit it. Izumi then used the attack as a distraction and began to run towards the gargoyle. He took advantage of the monster's blind spot on its back to unleash a powerful spell, a brutal purple energy, which exploded the creature, eliminating it instantly and ending the combat. Relieved, the three celebrated their victory, but Izumi soon warned that the real challenge was just beginning. They came across another portal, and Izumi instructed the girls to stay sharp. Kana and Nozomi had believed that the recently defeated demon would be the final boss, but the amount of magic emanating from the dungeon clearly indicated that this could not be the final room. After all, it was an S-rank dungeon, and there would certainly be many more rooms to explore. Entering the new portal, they arrived in a different room, where a spiral staircase ascended. Passing through a door, they were warned that once they proceeded, they would not be able to return until everything was cleared. Aware of this and determined, the group advanced, climbing the spiral stairs until they reached another door on the second floor, illuminated by torches with a strange purple light. Apparently, the room was empty of monsters, and Izumi walked to the center. The exact moment he arrived, gargoyles began to fly around them, appearing out of nowhere. Izumi observed that if they fought in the same way as before, dealing with those new monsters would not be difficult. The combat began, and the group knew that as long as they stayed together, they would overcome any challenge. Nozomi advanced with her weapon, delivering a precise cut to one of the monsters and defending it from attacks. While she took charge of drawing attention, Izumi unleashed his brutal purple magic, gradually reducing the number of gargoyles, eliminating them one by one. Izumi, the reincarnated one, noticed that the monsters were acting with more caution towards him after his last attack. He realized he wasn't alone. While the gargoyles were preoccupied with him, Nozomi attacked from behind. Receiving blows from the front and back, the creatures began to falter. Although their individual attributes were not low, the lack of coordination in their attacks was evident. Izumi wondered if that was Matsubara's limit, the dungeon's creator, or just his preference. However, it didn't matter, because for them, those creatures no longer posed a real threat. Izumi then unleashed his ice rain magic, eliminating several gargoyles at once. Kana, impressed, commented that from then on they should always battle in that manner. Izumi agreed, emphasizing that as long as they didn't let their guard down and remained precise, they would have no problems. Thus, the group continued their journey, conquering the dungeon floor by floor. On the third floor, they faced a fierce werewolf. On the fourth, a giant ogre. They overcame each challenge until, on the fifth floor, they encountered the final level of Matsubara's S-rank dungeon. There, a terrifying sight awaited them, a gigantic and fearsome dragon, reminiscent of the final boss of the Sky Dungeon. Izumi warned the two girls that this would be a much more difficult opponent, but after all they had overcome, he stated with conviction that there was no enemy they couldn't defeat together. He then prepared for combat, gripping his sword firmly and facing the dragon head-on. From the moment they entered that room, turning back was no longer an option. Even if the enemy was extremely strong, they had no choice but to defeat it. Following their combined strategy, Nozomi advanced, drawing the dragon's attention. At that instant, the creature prepared to deliver a swift tail strike in her direction. The girl, alert, saw the attack coming and dodged with agility. She then leaped to position herself at the monster's height. At her current level, she could still predict the dragon's movements. However, suddenly, a fireball began to fly towards her, and fear gripped Nozomi. Nozomi, feeling it would be impossible to dodge the imminent attack, closed her eyes. It was at that crucial moment that Meguru held her in his arms, pulling her away from the fatal blow. Furious, the dragon began to unleash several fire blasts, but Kana, with her magic, promptly created shields to defend the group. These shields not only protected Meguru and Nozomi, who were the primary targets, but the entire team. Izumi observed that Nozomi had dangerously approached the dragon, a clear sign of her growth and strength. However, Nozomi still felt insecure because, in the decisive moment, she couldn't act. Meanwhile, Meguru, the protagonist, saw the creature begin to form a purple energy ball in its mouth and felt a chill. There was no other option but to buy time with a smokescreen. He quickly conjured a spell that enveloped the dragon in mist, disorienting it and preventing it from seeing. He then used his search ability to visualize the environment, even through the dense smoke. Kana, his sister, was frightened by not being able to see anything, and Meguru held her in his lap, reassuring her, as he could see perfectly. In that short interval, the dragon proved to be more intelligent than it seemed, assessing the combat abilities of the three and focusing on Kana. The same strategy wouldn't work again. Therefore, Meguru decided that Nozomi would switch positions, while Kana, the pink-haired girl and the group's healer, should protect herself and maintain her defensive stance. Placing a hand on her shoulder, he affirmed that she was perfectly capable of fulfilling this task, as he knew that, in her current state, Kana was strong enough to protect herself. If Kana trusted herself, he could fully commit to the combat. Determined, the pink-haired girl firmly gripped her shield and assured the hero that she would protect herself. From that moment on, the battle would become an individual confrontation. Meguru brandished his sword to face the dragon, which, without wasting time, began to conjure fire magic and unleashed its fiery breath. Izumi Meguru dodged by running, and as he did so, he thought of Nozomi, who had become incredibly strong recently. He had felt uneasy always being the one to protect Kana, but now he trusted Nozomi with that task, and this reassured him, allowing him to focus solely on the final boss and have a greater chance of victory. The dragon took flight, launching several attacks and stalactites that the protagonist defended with his sword. For now, the only thing Meguru could do was cast a spell at the dragon's back, hitting it squarely. However, the creature remained unscratched, proving to be extremely resistant. Normal attacks didn't cause much damage, but Meguru knew that no matter how resistant a monster was, there would always be weak points. Observing the creature's joints, he noticed they were flexible and soft. All he needed to do was apply pressure there. Meguru ran, trying to attack the joints, but the aggressive monster wouldn't let him get close. The moment the dragon attacked, he seized the opportunity to position himself underneath and deliver a sword strike. It was with this strike that he found the weakness, making a deep cut in one of the dragon's joints. The creature roared in pain, and its vital fluid began to spill. Bringing down a monster of that size with a single attack was impressive. Our protagonist held his sword menacingly, declaring that he would end that fight at that instant. The dragon then charged towards him with a low pass, and Meguru felt that something was wrong. The creature began to transform, changing color, while the magic it wielded also shifted. It was a phenomenon that occurred when a certain amount of damage was dealt. The monster would transform and increase its attributes. This happened now, with the dragon turning white and unleashing a powerful green beam against the protagonist. Meguru brandished his sword and defended the brutal blast, using an immense amount of his strength. He managed to defend the attack, but soon noticed that he wouldn't be able to deflect the blow completely. At that moment, the dragon's strength prevailed, and the protagonist was thrown far away by the impact. Kana, worried, ran to heal him. However, the protagonist ordered the girl not to approach, because if she became the dragon's target, he wouldn't be able to protect her. He knew he had to deal with the creature alone. Kana was upset, frustrated that he always did the same thing and played the hero. Then, Meguru took out a full health recovery potion. If he managed to get out of that situation, he promised himself he would trust her more. He preferred her healing, but if the dragon knew they used healing magic, it would become a problem. His solution was to act quickly and eliminate the dragon. Thus, he leapt, reaching the creature's height as it began to conjure the same spell as before. Having already witnessed the effect of that breath attack, the protagonist conjured his own spell downwards, propelling himself even higher. After escaping the attack, he drew his sword and aimed at the dragon's wings, charging forward with full force and severing them with a refined and precise strike. The attack was extremely effective, causing the dragon to howl in pain and fall to the ground immediately afterward. Meguru had no time to rest. While he was preparing his next attack, the dragon lashed its tail towards him, interrupting the reincarnated's assault. He was forced to dodge the tail whip. After evading the blow, the monster, despite its size, proved to be swift and charged rapidly, using its claws to strike at Izumi Meguru. Caught off guard, Meguru was surprised by the attack that struck him directly, sending him flying against the stone wall. The impact caused him intense pain, while the girls, visibly worried, expressed their desire to help him. Our hero, aware that small differences could be overcome with equipment and technology, recognized, however, the stark disparity between him and the creature, a gap difficult to bridge. Facing this immense disadvantage, he quickly used his full recovery potion. Meguru considered that by destroying the wall, he could create an escape route. His plan was to act as a decoy for the two girls to escape, as he saw no other way out. With this intention, he shouted for them to listen closely, announcing that he would break the wall. However, before he could finish explaining his plan, he was attacked again by the white dragon. The monster's tail strike destroyed the spell the protagonist was conjuring, thwarting his plan. As the dragon prepared to deliver another tail strike, Meguru quickly created a magic shield to defend himself, remembering that it was the amulet that prevented instant fatal attacks. Observing the creature's colossal size, he couldn't even discern a single opening to strike. Suddenly, the purple mark reappeared on his hand, exactly as it had before. The system then asked if he wished to activate the Crest of Duty and acquire extreme power. Meguru knew that if he accepted, he would gain immense power and be able to defeat the monster. However, he also knew that if he failed to eliminate a target within 300 seconds, he would perish. Seeing the dragon roar terrifyingly, Meguru felt pressured, unsure of what to do. Without hesitation, his answer to the question was no. He understood that even sacrificing himself to defeat the dragon wouldn't guarantee Kana's safety forever. Therefore, he decided he would let the girls escape and then flee with them. Even if he was the bait, Meguru had no intention of being eliminated. He began to conjure a new spell, freezing several specific points on the dragon, including its enormous paw. Just as he was gaining confidence, believing he would win, the monster destroyed the ice. It was then that a different mark, with wings, appeared on his hand. This was the Crest of Hope, which could only be used for 30 seconds. Meguru realized there was no risk, and that it was different from the Crest of Duty, so he decided to use it. His attributes increased by 500 points, and he felt power surging within him. He knew 30 seconds was a short time, but he believed it would be enough. He advanced towards the dragon, which tried to strike with its claws. Instantly, the protagonist dodged, as he could clearly see the attacks. With no more time to lose, Meguru noticed the dragon preparing a poisonous breath attack. Even knowing it was a bit reckless, he decided to close the distance between them, leaping and using his magic downwards, gaining height through the propulsion. Very close to his enemy, he was sure that this would be the final blow. He launched his ice spear with maximum power, while the dragon released its green breath. The two attacks collided, and a clash of power ensued at that moment, until finally, the monster was hit squarely, losing the confrontation and being slain for good. Our hero received a double attribute boost, as expected from an S-rank dungeon. Additionally, he gained 50 more points because of the Crest of Duty, a side effect of the Crest of Hope. Unlike the other crest, this one didn't drain his energy, and he wondered where that mark had come from. At the end of all this, he obtained the Crest of Souls, a high-level reward. However, he saw no apparent visual change, and wondered if he could now use Matsubara's power for himself. At that moment, Kana appeared, shouting the boy's name, and hugged him tightly. Our reincarnated hero showed he was fine, alleviating his younger sister's concern, who noticed how much stronger her brother had suddenly become. Nozomi asked if the enemy lowering its guard was part of the strategy. Meguru replied that it wasn't, that he had just felt a sudden surge of power he didn't quite understand. He promised to tell her what he had understood later, but first, he wanted to leave the place immediately. Even without fully understanding what had happened, he was happy they had cleared the entire dungeon. While Meguru contacted the head of the Hunter's branch, we are transported to something that happened 8 hours earlier. Futaba and Hidaka watched the Hunters landing by plane and commented that the time had come. Somewhere in the central district, several skeletons rattled against the fences, attracting a guard's attention. Futaba, who controlled the skeletons, tricked the man and cast a spell on him, eliminating him. She knocked him down because he had touched her with his dirty hands. At that moment, the girl said that the real fun would begin and looked maliciously. If they reached the evacuation camp, they would be able to communicate. Nozomi suggested they head towards the airport, though Meguru found the distance excessive. Despite the objection, the group proceeded to the evacuation camp, where they encountered countless injured people. Kana expressed her horror at the sight, while Izumi remarked that the scars left by the monsters were indeed irreparable. Kana, his younger sister, realized he was speaking from personal experience. Upon entering one of the tents, Meguru questioned a group of hunters about the extent of the damage. They explained that the situation was dire, with many injured, and the lack of sufficient healers left them unsure how to proceed. Izumi, despite his desire to help, felt powerless, being unemployed and considering the task beyond his capabilities. Even for Kana, a professional, the scale of the problem seemed immense and unmanageable. It was then that Kana asked Meguru if she could borrow his magical power, explaining that her own own magic was being drained, and thus she needed his help. She clarified that while healers were not efficient at directly restoring life force, they were extremely skilled at exchanging magical power. This meant they could reverse the situation by drawing magical power from others and distributing it to those in need. Suddenly, the injuries of everyone present began to heal, leaving the wounded people in shock, calling the event a miracle. Kana, in turn, thanked Meguru, stating that the responsibility was his, as he had used his magic for the feat. Izumi, impressed, commented that even with sufficient magical power, he would never be capable of something like that, praising his younger sister for her astonishing achievement. Nozomi also hugged her, congratulating her for healing everyone. After this moment of relief, Meguru announced that the monsters should no longer appear, revealing to the hunters that he, Kana, and Izumi had cleared the dungeon. Surprised, everyone listened as he explained that someone had surely eliminated Matsubara, which would have been the reason for the dungeon's revolt and the subsequent emergence of the creatures. While those present wondered who could accomplish such a feat against the former hero, Meguru, though without confirmation, presented his theory, a fake Matsubara left by Hidaka. Given the complexity of the situation, he saw no other possible culprit. The hunters expressed their gratitude, acknowledging the strength of Japanese hunters like Meguru. He, in turn, was thinking of contacting the head of the Hunters Association to report the situation when he was caught by surprise by two voice messages. Upon listening to them, the first revealed the chief shouting that something extremely serious had happened. The second message informed that Futaba and Hidaka had appeared in the central district with a strategy, and subsequently, thousands of S-rank dungeons had emerged throughout Tokyo. The chief then apologized for demanding that Izumi and Meguru return home, even though they were exhausted. The message revealed that 7 hours earlier, Hidaka and Futaba had arrived in the district for the first part of their plan, initiating Hidaka's final scheme. He mentioned the fragmented magic crystals that had scattered across Japan, and how, because of this, there was no other option but to search for and collect them one by one. However, Hidaka claimed to be different from other heroes. Having summoned his beasts, he used them to carry magic stones across Japan. His strategy was clear. By using the immense amount of mana contained within these stones to bring them to the surface, the fragments would naturally gather around the remnants of the Sky Dungeon. Ambitious, Hidaka knew that he only needed to wait for the magic crystal fragments to be his. Impressed, Futaba took photos of the magic crystals. An hour later, she asked how long it would take for the plan to materialize, and Hidaka estimated about 6 hours. Annoyed, Futaba decided to return to the hotel, instructing him to notify her if anything happened, and she needed to come back. Finding her attitude childish, Hidaka bid her a temporary farewell. Hidaka knew that Japan's hunters, including Meguru, were still occupied in China. As long as nothing serious occurred, he believed he could handle everything alone, sensing that little time remained until he would finally become a god. Suddenly, the remnants of the Sky Dungeon in the district began to glow. This dungeon had collapsed hundreds of years ago, but its traces were preserved. Furthermore, there were signs of Hidaka and Futaba's presence nearby, although only the chubby one was being seen at the moment. The association head warned that there was a high probability that the former hero Hidaka was involved, and that, for now, Meguru and his team were the only ones they could trust, counting on them to resolve the situation. Finally, the hunter team arrived in Tokyo. Nozomi asked Meguru if he would be able to fight, considering his sword had broken. Meguru, the hero, remembered the moment when the dragon's attack destroyed his weapon. Fortunately, Izumi still possessed remaining magic stones and managed to forge another sword identical to the one that broke. Meguru, the protagonist, took his new sword, and together they activated anti-gravity to fly over the location. It was at that instant that Meguru, the reincarnated one, met Hidaka after a long time. Hidaka, the former hero, was caught by surprise by Meguru's sudden arrival. The speed with which the protagonist appeared there left him perplexed. By the way Hidaka expressed himself, Meguru realized that he was behind Matsubara's demise. However, Hidaka, convinced of his victory, believed that he had already triumphed, and that Meguru could no longer do anything to stop him. Understanding the situation, Meguru knew that he needed to eliminate Hidaka to thwart his plans. Without hesitation, Meguru activated the mark on his hand, leaving the enemy in immediate shock. At that instant, several clones of Meguru appeared, accompanied by duplicates of Matsubara. Hidaka, now desperate, realized that he only needed a little more time for his plan to materialize. Noticing his adversary's panic, Meguru called the two girls, Nozomi and Kana, to end the fight fight as quickly as possible. The three armed themselves with their swords, and the mark on Maguru's hand activated as he prepared to use his magic and create a unique aura. Maguru ran towards the enemy with Kana casting a spell and Nozomi by his side. The strength of the copies depended directly on the amount of magic Hidaka infused into them. Although at first glance, having more clones seemed like an advantage, the division of magic among the 5 bodies made them individually weaker. Nozomi threw her axe towards one of the clones, who skillfully caught the weapon and returned the blow. The clone delivered an axe strike that almost hit the girl, but she managed to dodge. However, he followed up with a new attack, which Nozomi defended with her shield, then used it to hurl the clone away. As the clone tried to seize the opportunity for another attack, Maguru appeared and knocked him to the ground. As the clones began to be defeated, Hidaka's desperation grew. Only 2 clones remained, and one of them wielded an exceptionally large shield. One of the girls, probably Nozomi, advanced against him, launching an attack with her weapon, which was blocked by the massive shield. The clone smiled and used its own shield to strike the girl, throwing her far away. Next, she received a punch that threw her even further, leaving her wounded. The girl realized that the clones were stronger in Japan than they had been in China, and wondered what was happening as she saw the 5 clones standing again, more powerful than before. One of the clones cast a fire spell at Maguru, who dodged it with ease. Maguru, noticing the strength of the spells they could use, wondered why they weren't attacking with their full power. He then decided to employ extremely powerful techniques to end the fight once and for all. He cast a spell of thorns that emerged from the ground, and the shield-wielding clone defended against the attack. Maguru took advantage of the defense to rush in, attacking from below where the target had no line of sight. His attack resulted in a small cut on the clone's arm, whose skin was surprisingly tough. Maguru questioned why the clone had gone on the offensive, even with such effective defense, when it could have simply ignored his blows and brandished its swords to attack him directly. Pondering possible reasons, he formulated a few hypotheses. To confirm his theories, Maguru decided to test something and drew his sword. While the 2 girls took out their cell phones, he conjured a spell close to the ground. This magic resulted in a large ice barrier that separated the clones, and the trio advanced against them. Maguru charged at 2 clones, delivering a sword cut that knocked them down, causing significant damage. When one of them attacked him with a flimsy sword, Maguru defended the blow and broke the weapon in half, throwing the clone far away with great force. The other clone attempted a punch, but Maguru responded with a spell, an enormous ice stake that pierced the Maguru replica through the middle. The message he had sent to the girls was about dividing the enemies with a blocking spell, and with Kana's support magic, he could advance against the enemies while Nozomi used the shield. The 2 girls fought much more synchronously against 2 duplicates. Kana canceled one of the clone's magic, holding its fingers and nullifying the spell. At that moment, Nozomi took advantage of the opening to attack with her sword, eliminating the enemies. With Maguru's plan, they managed to defeat the toughest clones. It seemed the fakes didn't possess balanced attributes. One had good attack but was fragile, while the one using powerful magic was weak in other areas. Instead of being balanced, they excelled in specific areas. Maguru's strategy was simple: expose weaknesses and focus where there was deficiency. He believed he had fully discovered how these clones worked and stated that cheap tricks wouldn't work against him, and that Hidaka had underestimated the trio. Meanwhile, Hidaka sought to gain 5 more minutes. He considered his plan impeccable, but foreseeing that it wouldn't work entirely, he had already taken extra precautions. Considering the situation a test, Maguru now knew the enemy's attributes exactly. Making the clones disappear, Hidaka stated that Maguru's chance of winning was 0%. Our hero, Maguru, replied that they would see about that now, during the combat. Using the crest of false abilities, which also allowed him to use copy power on himself, Hidaka took the crystal in his hands and, through it, created several clones of himself. Maguru, finding the action ridiculous, as he had already expected this, and believed the outcome would be the same as before, conjured several fireballs and hurled them towards the bulky clones. Amidst the smoke, the remaining clones used the crystal and summoned an enormous monster. The counterattack materialized in the form of a terrifying centipede that advanced on the protagonist, delivering an extremely fast and powerful tail attack that caught him by surprise. Furthermore, numerous skeletons began to be summoned from portals, leaving Maguru fearful, as he thought he wouldn't be able to dodge. The multitude of skeletons fell upon him, forming a pile and crushing him. However, our hero abruptly stood up, throwing the undead away. Hidaka, in turn, commented that many movements had been wasted. He stated that he didn't need excessively high defense or heavy attacks, because as long as he possessed balance, he would win. Meguru noticed that Hidaka only defended the points where the attacks would land. This presented a problem, as Hidaka was using the Philosopher's Stone's mana to summon his copies. If he could use this without limits, the longer the fight dragged on, the worse it would be for the trio. A skeleton attacked Meguru, who responded with counterattacks. Seeing that he had no chance of defeating so many monsters, he decided to play his trump card, asking Hidaka if he had ever heard of the real copy and the Crest of Souls. This was the new crest Meguru had obtained after clearing Matsubara's dungeon, and he naturally understood how to use it, causing a red mark to appear on his hand. All he needed was a Philosopher's Stone, the same one Matsubara used to duplicate Japan. Unlike Hidaka, Meguru couldn't create duplicates of other people. However, in this situation, his version was more advantageous for battle, and he began to activate the mark. Rushing towards the enemy and using Matsubara's ability, which he acquired after finishing the dungeon, Meguru surprised Hidaka, who was shocked, as he had heard nothing about this technique and didn't expect to see a clone of Meguru. The first Meguru cast a powerful purple magic, while the second attacked the centipede with his sword. With this coordinated movement, they caused significant damage to the giant centipede. The girls found what Meguru was doing incredible and wondered which of them was the real Izumi, thinking the true one was the one holding the sword who had just jumped in front of them. Meguru explained that Hidaka's crest was part of the magical summoning lineage, but that both Megurus were real, only the nature of their abilities was different. In other words, to better explain its meaning, Meguru said he had simply split himself in two. At that moment, both of them invoked a very powerful lightning magic and charged at the enemy. If there were two versions of himself, it was like having twice the strength. They saw this in practice when one of them launched a powerful lightning bolt at the centipede, destroying it with the spell. Even Hidaka was hit and sent flying, and our protagonist moved behind him at that moment. Beginning to use his specialized stats, Meguru delivered a cut through the middle of Hidaka, defeating the former hero's copy and leaving only the true one, who was now afraid. A precise and specialized attack was dangerous, but Meguru wanted to overcome it with a powerful ability. Thus, he exposed the enemy's weakness, and it was at that moment that Meguru managed to tear off Hidaka's arm. Meguru said the victory was much easier than he had imagined, leaving Hidaka in complete despair upon realizing he was missing an arm. Pointing his sword at the man, he demanded that he reveal Futaba's location. Suddenly, Meguru began to feel an overloaded mana source. It was then that the process of Hidaka's mana crystal was completed. He began to laugh and declared that he had won that battle. He tried to crawl towards his mana crystal, but the protagonist did not allow it. Meguru finished off the villain by stabbing him in the back, leaving the girls stunned by the scene. After finishing Hidaka, Meguru went to the mana crystal and took it in his hands. He saw the system ask if he wanted to use the mana crystal to acquire divinity. Our protagonist didn't understand the meaning of acquiring divinity, and the villain called out to him, asking him to give him the crystal. Meguru was surprised that he was still alive. Hidaka said that the object was useless in Meguru's hand and that he should give it to him. Meguru replied that, meaningful or not, he would be the one to make the decision. Therefore, he asked what the item did and why Hidaka wanted to possess it so badly, stating that, depending on his answer, he would make his decision and consider the enemy's request. Gravely wounded and struggling to speak, Hidaka revealed that the crystal would transform him into a god. Without accepting further arguments, he ordered Meguru to hand over the item immediately. Even without knowing the details, Meguru felt that handing the crystal to the enemy would be a terrible idea, and thus, he refused the villain's request. Hidaka then told Meguru to look around, showing that disruptive lines, caused by the crystal's emergence, were already beginning to form dungeons. He warned that if exposed to the crystal for longer, these dungeons would become complete. Hidaka argued that Japan did not possess the military strength to clear the number of dungeons that would emerge. For that reason, he did not want meaningless sacrifices and wished to become a god to eradicate these threats. Meguru, in turn, told him to shut up, acknowledging that indeed, without the power of a divinity, the problem could not be resolved. However, he refused to allow his enemy to become this supreme being. Instead of letting Hidaka control the fate of the population, Meguru decided that he himself would become a god. At that moment, Meguru clicked the yes button on the system. However, he was informed that the transformation into divinity failed because he did not possess the necessary qualifications. Hidaka explained that only a dungeon master could become a divinity. He warned that if the dungeons were left alone, monsters would emerge from them and invade Earth. Asking if Meguru would allow everyone to die because of his decision, Hidaka compared the situation to Meguru slaughtering people himself. Meguru was unsure what to do, as he didn't want to hand the crystal to Hidaka. However, he realized there was no other way to stop the situation without doing so. Completely stuck, he saw Hidaka waiting for him to hand over the crystal. After all, there seemed to be no other way out. At that instant, a portal appeared behind Kana, and skeletons tried to grab her foot. Hidaka insisted that Meguru make a quick decision if he didn't want the girl to get hurt. However, before Meguru could act, Hidaka received a precise sword attack to his head and was eliminated. Our hero, Meguru, declared that harming Kana was an unforgivable crime for him. Filled with hatred, he eliminated Hidaka with his sword. Now that he had eliminated the former dungeon hero, Meguru wondered what to do. He considered handing the mana crystal to another master to become a divinity. He thought of Futaba, but after further reflection, he discarded the idea, knowing she was problematic. Kana suggested that the three of them think together about a solution to the problem. The moment Meguru handed the mana crystal to his sister, the item resonated and glowed in her hands. Kana then stated that she was capable of doing something with that magical item, asking him to leave it with her. Our protagonist obeyed. Suddenly, many memories she didn't recognize flooded her mind. She presumed it was what had been called a past life, and accessed the memories of the heroine Kana. Although she didn't precisely remember the details, she felt that, being herself in the memories, she could change the current situation. First, she needed to understand the direction of the magic being released from the mana crystal. After understanding this, and sensing the energy's movement, she would bend and solidify it. Suddenly, they noticed that the crystal's magic weakened, and the dungeons began to disappear. They questioned what Kana had done, and she explained that it was a seal, organizing the magic that had been released from the crystal. After that, she sealed the magic. Meguru asked where she learned to do that. In response, Kana recounted that upon touching the crystal, memories of her other life flooded her mind. Even though she was unsure, she tried and succeeded in sealing the crystal in the dungeons. Our protagonist believed it was the power of the past life, and it made sense that the heroine Kana had achieved this. It seems, however, that her memories did not return completely. Meguru decided that it didn't matter for now, as it worked, and thanked his younger sister for saving him. Just then, Meguru received a call from the hunter's chief, who had watched the live broadcast. The chief congratulated him on his impressive work, but warned that it was too early to relax. After all, even with the former hero Hidaka eliminated, Futaba was still alive. Meguru thought that since he had eliminated her before, he would easily find her location. However, his chief said over the phone that they already knew where Futaba was. Meanwhile, Futaba was seen atop a building, observing her drone's cameras. She realized the situation was more difficult than she expected, as she hadn't known the trio was so strong. Frustrated by her friend's elimination, she knew she would be the next target. Aware that she needed to get out of there as quickly as possible, she started to run. Fleeing rapidly, she encountered police tape sealing off her location. Just as she tried to leave the area, a fireball appeared, heading straight for her. Izumi asked if she had allowed Futaba to escape, and Futaba realized she was in the worst-case scenario. She noticed that Meguru was alone, and his friends hadn't arrived yet. She figured he was just buying time until his allies arrived. To her surprise, Meguru declared that he intended to eliminate her right then and there. Futaba, with a mocking smile, questioned Meguru if he truly believed he could face her alone, asserting that his strength wouldn't be enough for victory. In response, the irritated villainess commanded them not to underestimate her, immediately unleashing a barrage of spells. Our hero, however, demonstrated great dexterity, dodging all the attacks and emerging unscathed. Spotting an elderly woman on the street, Futaba, without hesitation, began to direct her spells at the innocent person. Thanks to his instincts, Meguru acted quickly, protecting the elderly woman by turning his back to the attacks. The spells hit and exploded against his back as he embraced her to save her. Futaba laughed, mocking Meguru and saying that it had been disappointing. As he fell to the ground, she declared the outcome anticlimactic, and Meguru noticed the villainess's good mood. To Futaba's surprise, Meguru was standing behind her, revealing that the fallen body was merely a clone. The real Meguru, he asserted, was the one standing there now. Using the Crest of Souls, he had summoned a version of himself to deceive her and buy time. The villainess became extremely irritated, as no one had informed her that he possessed such an ability to create copies. Our hero, under no obligation to give her explanations, charged at Futaba. Meguru advanced at high speed toward the villainess, who responded by creating spells to counter his own. He conjured several fireballs, which Futaba defended with magical shields. Next, he he drew his sword and delivered multiple slashes that came very close to hitting her. However, the enemy dodged all the blows with great dexterity. Even so, Meguru noticed that by evading so many attacks, she was visibly tired. Given this, he decided to attack her once more, aware that his chances had increased. At that exact moment, Nozomi arrived, running alongside Meguru, our reincarnated hero. She suggested they create a trap to corner Futaba from the sides. Ever since she touched the mana crystal, the healer had learned to do many things, and an example of this was the magic she had just created by striking her scepter on the ground. A great deal of energy began to emanate, and Futaba noticed the arrival of the two girls. The villainess declared that seeing happy girls filled her with rage, and that she intended to eliminate both of them. Therefore, she launched guided explosion spells at Nozomi. The guided magical missiles exploded, but Nozomi protected herself and suffered no damage. Emerging from the smoke, she began to run toward the villainess, who was surprised to see her without a scratch. Then, Nozomi delivered a sword attack that Futaba blocked with her shield. However, running behind her to encircle her came Meguru, and Futaba couldn't see him. Centuries ago, one of the reasons Nozomi was chosen as a challenger for the Sky Dungeon was because, in addition to being a healer, she was an excellent high-level defender. Therefore, Nozomi could continue advancing without problems and without worry, because at that instant, Nozomi emerged from behind her and delivered a cut to her arm, hitting her squarely. Following that, Meguru delivered a magic-imbued punch to Futaba's back. The villain suffered significant damage and was thrown a great distance due to his brutal strength. However, Futaba was still alive, and Nozomi and Meguru once again surrounded her. She began to grow desperate, knowing that if the fight continued this way, she would surely die. Even though she hated using it, as it wasn't her style, she realized it was no time to be particular. So, she activated the mark on her hand, and the protagonist and his ally decided to end the fight at that moment. After activating the mark, black wings sprouted from the villain's back, and she evaded Nozomi's attack. With astonishing speed, the enemy vanished and reappeared atop the traffic light. She then transformed into a powerful creature with black eyes and fangs, in addition to the wings. Futaba was enraged at having to use this ability that made her look hideous. Suddenly, she took flight, and hovering above them, conjured her magic missile spell, which flew towards the two and was blocked by Izumi Meguru's sword. Without giving them time to react, the transformed Futaba charged at them with intense hatred, unleashing more high-speed attacks and managing to land a punch on Nozomi. This blow sent the healer flying a great distance and caused her to faint from its sheer force. Meguru pondered that enhancing abilities through transformation was acceptable, but the wings were a problem. Our hero had thought he had turned this situation into a 3-on-1 fight, but after this transformation, they no longer possessed the combat advantage they had before. Recognizing this, Meguru knew they wouldn't stand a chance unless they cut off her wings. Then, Nozomi woke up and asked how they would do that. Meguru had no plan and didn't know exactly if they would have the chance to accomplish such a feat. Thanks to the Crest of Souls, he now understood how to activate these marks. Activating the Crest of Souls on his hand, Meguru felt that with this enhancement, he believed he could deal with the villain. Meguru knew that if he didn't eliminate Futaba within 300 seconds, he himself would perish. However, this prospect didn't faze him, as he could see the path to victory through the use of his mark. Kana, in turn, used her enhancement magic to strengthen both combatants, Meguru and Nozomi. With these buffs and the activated crest, Meguru was able to employ his spells with significantly increased power. As she received the attacks, Futaba wondered how many crests Meguru possessed. However, she defended herself with her magic shield, confident that that level of attack wouldn't harm her. Upon feeling the impact, the villain noticed that Meguru's crests didn't seem special at all. It was then that Nozomi surprised her, advancing at high speed with a charged attack. Her allies, Meguru and Kana, fully trusted in Nozomi's charge as she wielded her sword and delivered a cut with all her might. However, Nozomi's blow missed its target as Futaba dodged with her keen dexterity. In retaliation, Nozomi received a blow to the stomach, being thrown back and beginning to fall from a dangerous height. Without hesitation, Meguru leaped between buildings, catching the girl in his arms to save her and landing safely. Nozomi had only resisted the villain's attack thanks to Kana's protective barrier. Nozomi asked Kana to heal her as a precaution, then apologized for almost hitting the villain. Izumi Meguru thanked Nozomi as he now fully understood Futaba's special ability. The villain, in turn, flew to the building where they were hiding. Even surprised by their attacks, she deemed them insufficient, asking if that was all the strength they possessed. Meguru reflected on the Crest of Hope, which, despite having no drawbacks, could only be used once a day. Now, he would have to rely solely on the Crest of Duty, which he believed would be enough. After all, 60 seconds still remained. He began to descend from the building, feeling it was time to act. He dodged Futaba's spells and used his ice crystals. Finally, he charged a powerful sword move, which was blocked by the villain's magic shield. They entered a clash of strength, and when Futaba realized she was losing, she began to take flight. As long as she maintained distance, she would have the advantage, so she continued to fly high. Facing several spells launched at once, Maguru declared that she wasn't the only one who could fly. Through the power of his mark, he flew from the building to Futaba's height, delivering a very swift charge that she didn't expect and couldn't dodge. As a result, Futaba lost one of her wings and began to fall from her altitude, hitting the ground hard and becoming severely injured. Our protagonist had used anti-gravity, an ability that consumed a lot of mana but proved crucial in that critical moment. He had gained an advantage and an opening, seizing the opportunity to leave the villain wounded and missing a wing. Now, the situation was once again 3 against 1, with Futaba on the ground and incapacitated. The enemy began to grow desperate, crying and begging them not to eliminate her. Crying and detransforming, she pleaded for her life to be spared. Izumi Maguru smiled, pretending he would do as the woman asked. The moment she felt a glimmer of hope that she would live, the protagonist revealed the truth. He would never spare her life. In her desperation, the girl claimed she would do anything to get out alive and began to remove her clothes. However, our hero was not interested in her proposals and coldly eliminated the villain, plunging his sword into the chest of the former hero Futaba, thus concluding his revenge. Looking at the crest of duty in his hand, Maguru's vision began to blur, and he felt exhausted, almost fainting. His 2 allies, Kana and Nozomi, arrived to help him, stating that he had done a great job. Afterward, the trio headed to the Hunters Association. There, the chief handed them coffee and apologized to the 3 for having to fight in such a way, but congratulated them on their impressive battle. Upon seeing the magic crystal, the chief suggested that the association could keep it. However, Maguru decided that the crystal would remain with them. The chief, though he hated to admit it, preferred to trust the boy over the association itself. Even sealed, the magic crystal's function had not been lost. If the seal were removed, countless dungeons would reappear. There were 2 known ways to remove this seal. One was if Kana willingly released it, and the second, if Kana were eliminated. However, they couldn't control the existence of other methods. Keeping the crystal with them was the safest option for now. Furthermore, other hero groups would certainly pursue this item. Maguru knew that keeping the crystal with them would cause villains to pursue them, and that was exactly what he wanted, as it would work in his favor. Nozomi then asked what they should do now. The chief explained that when a dungeon master is eliminated, their dungeon collapses in 2 weeks. If local hunters couldn't handle it, they would have to clear the area themselves. The prospect of 2 S-rank dungeons at once startled Nozomi, Izumi's sister. The chief concluded by saying they should discuss the situation with local authorities first, and for now, they should rest. Meanwhile, on a global scale, ancient heroes began to awaken to new realities. In Peru, one such hero discovered that Maguru had reincarnated. Simultaneously in Chile, an ancient heroine learned of Kana's return, and in Egypt, another ancestral hero also became aware of these events. They all quickly unraveled Maguru's abilities, and the disturbing truth that crests could be stolen. The hero in Peru revealed to be Tsurumi, prepared for his departure. Taking his bow and arrow, he charted a route that would take him first to Paris and then to Tokyo, stating with conviction that he would resolve the situation. The heroine, for her part, recognized that the stone mentioned was, in fact, the mana crystal. Although she thought Hidaka was useless, he had in some way eliminated part of the work of finding the crystal. Furthermore, everyone noticed that Maguru could use Matsubara's crest, and the question of how he did so hung in the air. The woman noted that they had left Shiraishi aside, and Tsurumi must have already realized this. Soon, she decided to follow the route from London directly to Tokyo. 4 days later in Tokyo, she finally arrived, finding it strange that a spell had been cast to expel people from the area. Suddenly, an explosion came her way, and she blocked it with her magic shield. The explosion originated from a golden arrow fired by Tsurumi. She had already expected his presence, but Tsurumi spotted her arriving in Tokyo by chance, which led him to follow her. He commented that the greeting was a bit rude after so long without seeing each other. The archer activated the mark on his hand and unleashed a volley of arrows, declaring that sooner or later they would have to eliminate each other, even if they had once been companions. Using the hero's crest, he fired magic directly for attacks, although it was merely magic enhanced by the crest. However, the high speed and volume of the shots made the situation extremely dangerous. In response, the mage activated the Crest of Wisdom, amplifying her own magic. Drawing mana from dragon veins and nature, she reflected everything into a large fireball, launching this giant energy towards the archer. He tried to stop the assault with a few arrows, but realizing the futility of stopping such an absurd spell, he began to flee the scene. As soon as the magic hit the spot where he had been, everything exploded, causing a devastating impact. She noticed that Tsurumi possessed superior agility to hers, concluding that in a one-on-one combat, she would probably neither win nor lose easily. It was still too early to predict the outcome of this fight, but suddenly, the archer acquired black wings. Utilizing the saint's crest, he manifested enormous wings and a grotesque, demonic appearance. Upon activating his wings, he began to glide in the air and charge an enormous radiant arrow, finally launching it with the force of thunder. The arrow, emanating energy, struck the mage's shoulder, causing her intense pain and filling her with electricity. The archer, satisfied with the impact, preferred to leave the fight for now, flying away. Leaving the mage with deep hatred, she declared that she would never forgive him. Meanwhile, elsewhere, our protagonist, Meguru, was asking who had managed to clear the newly appeared dungeon. Kana noted that the phone call was about the Hidaka and Futaba dungeons. It seemed that Tsurumi and Kawasaki were responsible for clearing these dungeons, and the suspicion was that they were aiming for the inheritance crest. Nozomi added that photos of Meguru wearing the Matsubara crest were already circulating online. In any case, the hero had become even stronger, and they decided they should share what they knew with everyone. Meguru then recalled what had happened on the first floor of the Sky Dungeon in his past life. Back then, he had asked Kawasaki to take things more seriously, but she was reluctant to put in much effort. Her magic was strong, and she believed others should clear the way so she could cast her spells. However, Meguru was only asking her to work more as a team, a request that wasn't burdensome. Instead, she blamed Kana, saying the girl did nothing but stand beside the protagonist and wasn't needed on the team. Izumi, upon hearing this, became very angry with her. While they were discussing Tsurumi, someone knocked on the door quite late at night. Suddenly, Tsurumi himself appeared at Meguru's door, greeting him with, "It's been a long time." Meguru, without hesitation, asked the reason for his appearance, and grabbing his sword, immediately launched an attack, seeing an unexpected chance he didn't want to waste. The girls, meanwhile, thought it might be a fan of Meguru, as he had become quite popular since the live broadcast, even having an unofficial fan club of girls smitten with him. Kana stood up, determined to check who was knocking so late at night, and Nozomi decided to go with her. As they left the room, they found the protagonist fighting the archer. They recognized the former bow and arrow hero who had been part of the sextet 100 years ago. Tsurumi then stated that he hadn't come to fight Meguru and asked him to stop attacking. Our hero stopped his attack, pointing his sword at Tsurumi's neck, and asked what he truly wanted. The archer revealed that he had discovered Meguru was a reincarnated being and had come to apologize for what happened 100 years ago. Meguru didn't understand the apology and suspected some malicious intent, asking if Tsurumi was trying to lower his guard to attack him while he was vulnerable. To Izumi, the former hero had gone too far, and his actions couldn't be resolved with a simple apology. As Izumi told him to reflect on his actions in the afterlife, Meguru prepared another sword attack. Even facing Izumi's threat, Tsurumi the archer shouted, claiming he had been against what they did until the very end. However, he revealed that he had been coerced. If he defended Meguru and his sister, he would be eliminated along with them, leaving him no choice. Kana then intervened, holding Izumi back and asking him to give Tsurumi a chance, to at least listen to him. Meguru, yielding, decided to give him an opportunity and lowered his sword. They sat down to talk, and Izumi asked the reason for the archer's visit. Tsurumi replied that he had come to apologize for abandoning them and allowing them to be killed. As a hero, he should have been an example to others, but instead, he committed something unforgivable. He admitted that the excuse of being threatened by others wasn't good, and that's why he was there, ready to be held accountable for what happened to the two of them. Meguru then stood up and declared that it was time for Tsurumi to be held accountable. The archer argued that eliminating him wouldn't change anything, and Izumi agreed, but admitted it would make him feel good. Furthermore, it would remove one more of the threats hanging over Kana, his sister. He pondered that even by eliminating Tsurumi, Kawasaki and Shireishi would still have other heroes remaining, some even stronger than the archer. For this reason, Tsurumi didn't ask for forgiveness. Instead, he offered to help Izumi in his revenge, promising to reveal everything about the heroes and do whatever was necessary. When everything was over, Izumi could do whatever he wanted with him, free to let him live or not. Izumi Meguru then drew his sword and declared he would eliminate the old hero right then and there. Tsurumi felt fear, but the blade did not strike him. Meguru was merely testing him to see if he was a trustworthy companion. This meant he believed in Tsurumi, even if not entirely, and would accept his proposal. For Tsurumi, this was enough, and he promised to prove his words were not empty by acting honorably. The next day, he was to go with them to the Hunters Association and share the information he possessed. The archer agreed. Later, the girls asked Izumi how much he believed Tsurumi's story. Our hero replied that, at the very least, Tsurumi wanted to defeat the other heroes, and what he would do after that was uncertain. But as long as their interests were aligned, everything would be fine. Nozomi found Meguru surprisingly calm. He explained that Tsurumi was not strong enough to frighten him. Although they had exchanged few blows, Meguru noticed that his own attributes were higher than the archer's. Even if Tsurumi betrayed him, he would be able to defeat him quickly. It was because of this confidence that Izumi Meguru was so calm. Meanwhile, in a rank D dungeon, a giant scorpion was trying to eliminate a hunter. The hunter, motivated by a pink-haired girl named Minami, delivered a successful attack that eliminated the purple scorpion. The two, a deeply in love couple, exited the dungeon at dinner time. He intended to propose to Minami after that meal. At that moment, already nervous, he felt someone approaching. Kawasaki appeared, commenting that two people clearing a rank D dungeon wasn't bad at all. She said the man had passed, but Minami had failed some test. The man, irritated by the sudden appearance of the mage, didn't understand what she was saying. Then, Kawasaki used her mark of wisdom and demanded he become her pawn. Bewitched, Kakeru obeyed the woman's orders, and Minami was in shock. Due to the mage's spell, Kakeru stood up and cursed the woman he loved. Next, Kawasaki ordered Kakeru to eliminate his pink-haired girlfriend. Overwhelmed by Kawasaki's mental force, he obeyed and plunged his sword into his girlfriend's chest. The ancient hero desired 3 more pawns of this kind to control like puppets. Meanwhile, at the Hunters Association, Izumi Meguru brought Tsurumi to speak with the chief. Meguru asked the chief to trust him, assuring him that whatever happened, he would take care of it immediately. The chief understood the situation and decided to leave the matter in Izumi's hands. Our hero made it clear that he would only do this because he saw value in the archer, but that he had not forgiven him for what he had done 100 years ago. He then asked Tsurumi to provide all the information he possessed. Izumi hoped that Kawasaki and Shiraishi did not know they had formed a team with the archer, as Tsurumi, acting as a double agent, could use the situation to his advantage to bring them down. However, the archer seemed concerned about something he had forgotten to tell them. Kawasaki already knew this would happen. This irritated the association chief, and Tsurumi explained that he had fought against her recently. He wanted to bring Izumi proof that he wasn't lying, but he let her escape. That said, she didn't know that Tsurumi and Meguru were connected. Now it would be 4 against 1 in a fight they could win more easily. Even so, Kana warned that they couldn't let their guard down. The protagonist then asked the association chief to reveal the mage's whereabouts. However, Tsurumi, the archer, promptly informed them that such information would not be necessary. He explained that Kawasaki's magic still permeated her wounds, allowing them to precisely locate the villain. The only pending issue was to define the ideal moment to act, and the idea of going the next day arose. Although some considered this a delay, the protagonist warned that Nozomi was not available today, and it would be impolite to make her cancel her plans with her friends. Tsurumi fully agreed, as Meguru also saw this as the best approach. The archer then detailed Kawasaki's specialty, stating that the more time passed, the more dangerous she became. He revealed that her unique ability was magical hypnosis, capable of controlling people like puppets. Meanwhile, in a rank B dungeon, Nozomi and her friends were engaged in an intense battle against a colossal orc. Using their combined magic, Nozomi, the pink-haired girl, swiftly advanced to the enemy's back. However, the orc noticed her presence and attacked her, but Nozomi defended herself with her shield without any difficulty. In a swift movement, the monster received a blow to its back, and then the young woman delivered another attack that cut it in half. Thus, they successfully completed this rank B dungeon. Her friends, Hikari and Sakura, considered her incredibly strong, as clearing a rank B dungeon was an arduous task for them. Nozomi, enthusiastic about fighting together after so long, felt happy. Her friends commented that she had grown a lot and was visibly more powerful. They rejoiced at being together again, and Nozomi expressed the desire to enjoy the moment and forget any worries for today. At that instant, Kawasaki appeared, congratulating them on completing the B-rank dungeon as a trio. She claimed to find their feat impressive. Behind her, 4 hypnotized men were visible. Nozomi recognized Kawasaki Masato and was shocked by her unexpected presence. The mage then declared that Nozomi's 2 friends had failed and that only she was the one to pass the test, becoming the main prize. Nozomi, confused, questioned what Kawasaki meant by failed and main prize. Kawasaki replied that it meant exactly what she said, and that, with her magic hypnosis, she would add Nozomi to her collection. The trio, understanding the situation, realized that those men were action hunters, now controlled by the villain's magic. Faced with the threat, Nozomi instructed Hikari and Sakura to run immediately, as the three of them would have no chance of fighting Kawasaki. They should inform Izumi and Meguru as quickly as possible to get help. Kawasaki, however, declared that the only one she desired was Nozomi, and using her crest, tried to hypnotize her. Nozomi attempted to resist the spell, but the attempt caused her intense pain in her head. She fought with all her mental strength, but within her mind, she began to see visions, her friends accusing her of betrayal and coveting her position. However, Nozomi felt that something was wrong and fought the spell, realizing that it was all a lie. Her friends, in a mental plea, asked her to stay grounded in reality, and the girl managed to overcome the hypnosis magic. Kawasaki, surprised, considered this impossible, as her crest hypnosis had never failed. This confirmed her theory that Nozomi was a main prize. The trio, realizing that this was the perfect moment to attack, charged running towards the mage. The villain then revealed that her magic worked much better when she touched a person's head. She then ran after Nozomi, placed her hand on her head, and the young woman instantly fell. Still resisting the spell, Nozomi told her friends to run far away from her. At that moment, the sorceress ordered the girl to eliminate her own friends. Struggling desperately against the magic hypnosis, Nozomi, with a choked voice, again asked Hikari and Sakura to leave. The sorceress noticed that this process would take longer than she expected. Hikari and Sakura, apologizing, affirmed that they would return to save her later. At that instant, the pink-haired girl was completely enchanted, and her expression changed drastically. Her friends then sprinted to Meguru's house in search of help. Immediately, Meguru noticed Nozomi's absence and questioned what had happened. The girls entered his house and explained that Kawasaki had kidnapped her. Then, Tsurumi Yakumo, one of the 6 heroes, was introduced and informed them that he would work with them. The girls were shocked, even with Meguru explaining that there was a reason for this. Tsurumi, the archer, then explained that their friend being under Kawasaki's hypnosis was a serious problem. The protagonist asked if there was any way to undo the magic, and Tsurumi responded that, unfortunately, there wasn't. However, he revealed that he had a plan, and that the solution to this problem was Meguru himself. After all, he knew that Meguru possessed replication magic and, being truly unemployed, had no restrictions on using magic. Meguru, however, could not replicate the power of the crest that they all possessed, even if he knew how it worked. He would only be able to undo a spell if he fully understood its mechanism. Tsurumi explained that only the original caster could cancel the magic hypnosis. What they should focus on doing was overwriting her magic. Meguru, in turn, could not do this without understanding the mechanism, and therefore they needed to discover how the spell worked. The archer then stated that he had not spent hundreds of years doing nothing, and that he knew how to accomplish this task. To prove it, he took out several photos of Kawasaki's Mark of Wisdom. Meguru reflected on the vast knowledge he had acquired regarding Kawasaki's magic, a depth that impressed him. With the amount of information and details he now possessed, Izumi felt he could finally act. 3 hours of intense study later, he understood the spell's functioning, although he knew that the only way to be sure was by attempting to apply it. The uncertainty of what would happen in case of failure worried him, as given the nature of the magic, an error could be fatal. It was then that Nozomi's friends, demonstrating courage, asked Meguru to test the spell on them. Even Kana volunteered to help her friend. Tsurumi, for his part, was certain that the battle against Kawasaki was inevitable and that they could not afford to lose the healer. Meguru knew that he would count on his sister's help when the confrontation with the sorceress arrived. He then ordered everyone to prepare, as the plan would begin immediately. Recognizing that the mechanism of the magic hypnosis was surprisingly simple, Meguru decided to try it on one of the girls. The spell worked by lowering the target's consciousness through the mana circuit, adding a suggestion. The content of this suggestion was for the person to become a servant. Upon receiving the order, Hikari panicked, falling to the ground with an intense headache. The protagonist realized that he had failed in applying the spell, causing the girl pain. Even understanding the theory perfectly, he could not execute the spell with precision, but he knew that it was just a matter of practice. Hikari, with determination, affirmed that she would endure as many times as necessary until he was successful. Sakura, subsequently, expressed the desire to be the next to help with the tests. Meguru, realizing that they had already made their decision, allowed them to continue. An hour later, Meguru persisted in applying the spell with the command for the person to become a servant. Finally, the spell worked on the white-haired girl, Kana, who was pleased, as she had already expected such success from her brother. Eventually, Meguru undid the spell, instructing the person to free themselves. Seeing the spell work, he prepared to go to Nozomi and free her from the magical hypnosis. Meanwhile, in Shinjuku, the group of hypnotized hunters headed towards another dungeon. Kawasaki, observing them, wondered if there would be another valuable prize to be claimed. Suddenly, a spell came her way, and Nozomi loyally stepped in front to protect her. The spell stopped at the girl's shield, revealing it had been cast by Meguru. Kawasaki smiled, happy that Meguru Akabane had finally appeared. She noticed he was alone and asked if he was there for revenge. However, that was merely a decoy from Izumi, who had coordinated the plan with the rest of the group. The strategy was to use a clone as a distraction while he overwrote the magic on Nozomi. Rescuing her was the priority, above any revenge, and Meguru had mastered the technique. He would not fail now. While the girl had her back turned, looking at the clone, he cast the hypnosis spell to reverse the control. The magic hit his friend, but to his surprise, the spell simply vanished. At that instant, Kawasaki discovered that Meguru's real body had been hidden the entire time. Meguru explained to Tsurumi that his magic had vanished even before he could get close to Nozomi. With no time to figure out what had happened, the three, Meguru, Tsurumi, and the archer, grabbed their weapons to fight. Kawasaki noticed the archer's presence and realized he was helping Meguru. However, she stated that the reason he was by Izumi's side was none of her business. The sorceress warned that Meguru was being deceived, reminding him that Tsurumi had said he regretted everything. The archer, in turn, asked Meguru to ignore her, as she was merely trying to turn them against each other. At that moment, Kawasaki ordered her hypnotized servants to attack everyone. The pawns cast their spells at Meguru, who dodged with ease. Behind him, a sword-wielding hunter attacked him from behind, and he defended at the last second. Meguru didn't know how to fight them. After all, they were merely being controlled. He knew the situation was problematic, and it worsened when his friend Nozomi advanced. While defending against her sword attack, he tried to snap her out of the trance, shouting that it was him standing before her. He pleaded for the girl to wake up, but Tsurumi intervened, saying it was useless, as she wouldn't hear anything now. The mage, Kawasaki, realized they knew each other and commented that it was a funny coincidence. Tsurumi said they would figure out what to do about the hypnosis later, and for now, they should take down the servants. He stated that this would be easy, but defending against Nozomi's attack was the difficult part of the situation. Even under hypnosis, she hadn't lost her memories and still knew Meguru's abilities and patterns. She initiated a clash of strength, and at that very instant, a fireball flew towards him. Meguru dodged, and Nozomi took the opportunity to run around the side, trying to hit Izumi with a slash. His allies became worried, and the archer ran towards him to help, stepping in front of the pink-haired girl's sword strike and taking the blow instead of Meguru. Meguru was shocked to see Tsurumi sacrifice himself for the team. Tsurumi, his voice weak, said that his body had merely moved there and that, at least, he had avoided a fatal blow. He added that now Izumi might believe his words more, and then he immediately fainted. At that moment, Meguru ordered Kana to tend to the archer's wounds. Kana, with her expertise, managed to heal Tsurumi, keeping him alive. At that moment, Meguru recognized that he had lost his composure earlier. He then realized that, with the exception of Nozomi, none of the servants posed a real threat. When one of the sword hunters advanced on him, Meguru pushed him away with a precise kick. Assessing the situation, Meguru concluded that if they split into two groups, they could eliminate the weaker opponents first. Thus, his clone helped neutralize a less resilient hunter, and Meguru announced that only 3 enemies remained. The sorceress, however, intervened, stating that Meguru had not yet witnessed the true adrenaline coursing through her servant's veins. She explained that while humans normally control their true strength, under hypnosis, they unleash it completely. It was at that exact moment that the hunter who had been knocked down began to gain muscles and strength in a terrifying manner. Faced with this transformation, Meguru couldn't believe that this was the work of mere human beings. The same hunter, now with a robust and powerful body, attacked Meguru with renewed hatred. As he blocked the blow, Meguru clearly perceived that the previously frail hunter had become incredibly stronger. However, as he prepared for the second attack, the man began to spit out a substance that looked like tomato sauce. Suddenly, he showed a sudden weakness, and the other hunter clones began to exhibit the same symptom. Kawasaki, with disdain, declared that those servants were useless, emphasizing that Nozomi was the only truly special one, as she remained standing. Meguru became worried, aware that the girl had her limits and was holding back for now. The mage then provoked him, saying that if he loved her so much, he should hand over the mana crystal, as she knew he possessed it. Meguru, without hesitation, stated that it was out of the question, and that he would eliminate her to rescue his friend. The mage, in turn, retorted that he hadn't realized the gravity of the situation he was in, and ordered her servant to eliminate him. At that instant, the servant dropped her shield and advanced against Meguru with a sword slash. As he defended himself, the protagonist wondered why the hypnosis hadn't worked on her. Unable to discover the reason, he focused on defending his friend's attacks. At one point, Nozomi grabbed Meguru's arm and tried to deliver a cut to his stomach. Meguru, apologizing to his friend, conjured a spell directly at her face. However, the spell didn't even cause a scratch, which was strange, because at that distance, it should have severely wounded her. This strangeness made Meguru realize that there must be another reason for Nozomi's unusual strength. Thinking of a new approach, he imagined a possibility and charged forward, holding the girl's arm. He concluded that an invisible barrier must be blocking his magic, a typical trick of Kawasaki. In any case, with the mystery solved, defeating her would be simple. Staying close, he directly overwrote the magic, touching her forehead and ordering her to awaken. Nozomi received the order, the spell dissipated, and she blacked out for a few seconds. Then she awoke, returning to her original consciousness while being carried by her friend. Stating that she was fine, she knew that Meguru would later tell her the details of what had happened. The sorceress was in shock, as she hadn't imagined that could happen. Tsurumi, seeing that the spell had worked, knew it was time to defeat Kawasaki. Now the team had the help of the pink-haired girl, who wielded her sword and shield. However, she collapsed to the ground, dropping her weapons, and her body couldn't move. Meguru explained that it was exhaustion due to the spell, as she had been using strength beyond her limit. She had been forced to move to her body's limit, which could cause serious injuries. Ordering the girl to rest for now, Meguru and Tsurumi decided to resolve the situation. Meguru asked Kana to take care of Nozomi while the two of them fought. Nozomi's friends also helped the girl recover. The mage, having lost all her servants, stopped playing around and took the combat entirely seriously. The archer Tsurumi warned his friend Meguru to be careful of Kawasaki's crest. Flying, the woman utilized the Crest of Wisdom, which allowed her to use magic generated by the environment. Absorbing the magic overflowing from the dragon's veins, she could steal energy from the dungeons. Taking everything for herself, she formed an extremely powerful spell. Launching an overwhelming ball of energy, she declared that she was not the same mage as before. The spell advanced with full force towards the two, but Kana invoked a shield that saved their lives. However, the shield dissipated, and they had to retreat to avoid the spell's damage. Meguru realized that he wasn't managing to land a single attack on the sorceress. Feeling superior, she ordered him to hand over the mana crystal. Meguru, drawing her away from the portal, feigned that this was the wisest choice to make. She said he should have done that from the beginning, but Meguru challenged her, telling her to come and get it, as he wouldn't hand it over. Seeing Meguru's courage, she promised to deliver something worse than death. Launching an extremely fast spell in his direction, Meguru dodged to the side. Her crest, compared to those of Matsubara and Hidaka, was much stronger. As she invoked several spells, Meguru explained that Kawasaki's crest had restrictions according to its power. The main restriction was that if there wasn't a nearby dungeon connected to the dragon's veins, the effect of her magic would be drastically reduced. For that reason, a dungeon portal appeared behind her, and the woman, surprised, exclaimed that it was madness. However, she confirmed that her power only existed because there was a dungeon right behind her. Meguru, dodging Kawasaki's powerful spells, questioned what would happen if the dungeon sustaining her disappeared. That B-rank dungeon would take at least 20 minutes for ordinary Japanese hunters to clear. However, it was at that exact moment that all the hunters controlled by Kawasaki emerged from the portal, complicating the situation. 3 hours earlier, Meguru and Tsurumi had devised a plan to rescue Nozomi. Realizing that the location was disadvantageous for them, Tsurumi explained the functioning of Kawasaki's crest, whose seemingly limitless power was terrifying. However, Meguru knew that without the dungeon, Kawasaki would lose her strength. He then asked the chief if there would be hunters capable of clearing a B-rank dungeon in 15 minutes. Shocked, the chief replied that only A-rank hunters could accomplish such a feat and that they would arrive in 30 minutes. Tsurumi, realizing that Meguru planned to intercept Kawasaki's fate, questioned what they would do if she tried to escape. Meguru, however, was certain that if they attacked simultaneously with the dungeon's disappearance, everything would work out. Even if they didn't defeat her, they would be able to bring their friend back. Thus, they decided to proceed with the plan. In the present, the hunters arrived 5 minutes late, but still managed to clear the dungeon within the required time. Meguru then pointed his sword at the sorceress, declaring that without her crest, she should feel fear. In shock, Kawasaki began obsessively and compulsively wondering what to do, until she decided to cast a desperate spell. The weak attack was easily cut in half by Maguru's sword. The woman fell to the ground, powerless, and he asked if her desperate blows had finally come to an end. Terrified, the sorceress expressed hope that he wouldn't hold a grudge for what had happened 100 years ago. The reincarnated one, without responding, approached her ominously, sword in hand. The woman begged him to wait, arguing that if Tsurumi had been forgiven, she should be too. Maguru, ignoring her, eliminated her by thrusting his sword into her back. With her elimination, Maguru's revenge was complete, and Kawasaki became the fourth hero to be struck down. Nozomi's friends, relieved, thanked Maguru for not losing their best friend. Izumi then clarified that part of the reason Nozomi was saved was due to their actions, but Maguru intervened, stating that he wasn't acting because of them, but because Nozomi was important to him. He had sought her out on his own, driven by the desire to save her. Nozomi's friends, in turn, acknowledged that they wouldn't have achieved anything alone, and thanked him again, mentioning that Nozomi was very happy that Maguru had said she was important to him. The girl herself, embarrassed, felt extremely happy with his words. Tsurumi then asked Maguru if he could continue to help him with his revenge, as the only remaining heroes for it to be completed were himself and Shiraishi. Maguru replied that if Tsurumi was willing to offer his strength, he would obviously accept. After the archer had sacrificed himself for him, Maguru realized he had judged the man wrongly. However, he still hadn't fully forgiven him for his past, and admitted that after eliminating Shiraishi, he didn't know what he would do regarding Tsurumi's fate. Maguru confessed that he was saying all this out of convenience, but Tsurumi was already happy not to have been rejected, asking Maguru to inform him as soon as he discovered Shiraishi's whereabouts. After this event, Maguru, Kana, and Izumi headed home. Kana, concerned, asked Nozomi to stay with them. The girl, embarrassed, hesitated, but Kana insisted, explaining that she was exhausted and they wouldn't abandon her. Maguru reinforced this, saying it wouldn't be a problem to have one more person in the house and also invited her to stay. Even after hearing all this, the pink-haired girl still felt awkward there. Izumi, noticing the situation, intervened, saying that although they might seem intrusive, Nozomi was very injured, and it would be better for her to stay close to Kana to be healed. Kana herself, Maguru's sister, commented that it was a miracle Nozomi was still moving. Gently, Meguru and Kana asked Nozomi to rest properly. Meanwhile, in Shinjuku, Shiraishi headed to the location where Hidaka and Futaba had been eliminated, determined to find the responsible hunter and seize the mana crystal. In a dark monologue, he pondered that there were things in the world that couldn't be obtained with money or power: status, honor, love. For him, true values resided in knowledge, and he would become the holder of all power and knowledge, a true deity. A child who was observing him asked if he was all right. The former hero, enchanted by the adorable child, revealed a malicious gaze. Noticing that no one was around, he said he would be happy to find someone as special as her. He then invited her to play, and the child innocently invited him to her home. Shiraishi promised not to hurt her, but immediately afterward, the former hero eliminated the child. Observing the heart, which he considered the secret of human life and the truth of the world, Shiraishi smeared himself with the person's vital fluid, feeling it still wasn't enough. The next day, Kana completely healed her friend. When the protagonist realized that Nozomi was fully recovered and her powers were fully functional, he understood that the girl was truly special. She, in turn, exulted with happiness as she finally felt ready to fight. Nozomi asked Maguru if he had already seen the day's news about the mysterious murder. As they turned on the television to check the news, the protagonist received an urgent call from his boss. The alarming message revealed that Shiraishi had entered the country the previous day. Our protagonist was shocked, and the boss then informed him that an incident was being broadcast on TV. Upon seeing the news of the murder, the leader of the hunters immediately attributed the blame to Shiraishi, stating that it had already been confirmed he was the true culprit. The protagonist then questioned the enemy's location. The branch chief, without hesitation, sent the coordinates to Maguru Izumi, who promptly declared that he would find the adversary and deal with him immediately. He called Tsurumi, explaining the urgency of a conversation about Shiraishi. The archer, understanding the intensity of Izumi's feelings, asked him to remain calm, suggesting that it wasn't too late to devise a strategy before attacking the enemy. When Tsurumi arrived in person, he warned that the chances of defeating Shiraishi in a fight at that moment were low. He explained that the ancient hero was on a completely different level from Kawasaki and the other adversaries they had faced. The archer asked if Maguru remembered Shiraishi from 100 years ago. A memory of Maguru Akabane from the past, on the first floor of the Sky Dungeon, surfaced. In it, the hero appeared fascinated by having found the Philosopher's Stone, displaying displaying the same psychopathic gaze. Matsubara, on that occasion, warned that the dungeon had been founded by the country, advising the ancient hero not to seize the treasures. However, Shiraishi, with disdain, considered it a treasure hunt and questioned if his actions bothered anyone. Even Futaba found his hobby quite strange. Tsurumi revealed that they only realized Shiraishi's hobby included human beings after Maguru's death. He asked if the protagonist wanted to hear what the ancient hero did to people, but Izumi refused, questioning why Shiraishi was so strong. The archer explained that the enemy's strength lay in his indifference to life, including his own, which made him extremely dangerous, as he fought without a safety margin, caring about nothing. Furthermore, Shiraishi possessed the knight's crest, which strengthened him even further, granting him 2 sacred swords, Excalibur, which drew out 100% of his potential, and Ascalon, which prevented his body from collapsing. Tsurumi concluded that Shiraishi had no weakness except his defense, and stated that Maguru would lose in his current state. Our hero, understanding Shiraishi's immense strength, began to think of a strategy when he received another call. Realizing it was the Hunter Branch chief again, he heard the desperate man plead for calm as something terrible had happened. The Hunter Association had been taken down, and he was being held hostage by the villain. Shiraishi Hokuto, taking the cell phone from the chief's hand, introduced himself, and, knowing that the protagonist had the mana crystal, ordered him to bring it to the association immediately. He stated that he would be waiting on the rooftop, having subdued all the hunters in the building. Izumi became desperate, and the enemy issued an ultimatum. If he didn't bring the crystal within 15 minutes, all the hostages would be eliminated. Apologizing to the archer, the protagonist declared that there was no time, and that they would go straight to the Hunter Association. Tsurumi decided to accompany them, reiterating that Maguru couldn't defeat Shiraishi at that moment, but there was a way to avoid defeat. The archer then shared an idea of how they could emerge alive from the combat against the ancient hero. Meanwhile, at the Hunter Association, the villain didn't expect to find Meguru so easily. He commented that the old man was a useful person, but the chief corrected him, stating that there was no way Shiraishi could acquire the mana crystals. Even with all his confidence and skills, Izumi was not weak enough to lose to him. Shiraishi, thinking everything was going according to his plan, would soon realize he was on thin ice. When the chief threatened him, Shiraishi found it all very amusing and with a kick, knocked down the leader who was putting all his chips on the protagonist. He acknowledged that, among all the hunters he had ever seen, Maguru was in a league of his own, being the strongest he had ever encountered in his life. 10 minutes later, the protagonist and his team arrived at the location, within the stipulated time. The villain asked if he had brought the crystal, and our hero then retrieved the magical item from within a portal. The protagonist demanded that Shiraishi release the hostages before handing over the artifact. At that moment, the villain took his sword and began cutting the hunter's restraints, who quickly fled the scene. His chief was freed and questioned if Meguru Izumi would truly hand over the crystal. The reincarnated one replied that he would not do so, and asked him to trust the rest to the team. Shiraishi, impatient, urged him to hand over the crystal, but the protagonist called him an idiot, creating several magical portals above the enemy's head and revealing that, obviously, they wouldn't have arrived there without a plan, knowing exactly where he was. Meguru Izumi, explaining that spells could be prepared in advance, unleashed a barrage of elemental magic over the head of his old adversary, Shiraishi. Shiraishi, in turn, brandished his sword, declaring that he would never be caught in such an obvious trap. Determined to teach a lesson to what he considered an ignorant hero, Shiraishi asserted that offense was always the best defense. With both swords in hand, he began to destroy Izumi's spells, neutralizing each attack, and then taunted, asking if that was all Meguru had to offer. In response, Meguru delivered a sword slash, but Shiraishi deftly dodged it. After the failed attack, the hero attempted a downward strike. Thus began an intense sword duel, where both attacked and defended with equal mastery. His enemy's skill far surpassed what Meguru had expected. Faced with this, he decided to activate one of his crest marks, creating a duplicate of himself. Meguru then declared that the real combat was just beginning, to which Shiraishi retorted, stating that even with 2 swords, he could defend against both attackers, rendering the strategy useless. However, Shiraishi had not accounted for a third presence. Suddenly, Nozomi appeared from above, delivering a downward sword strike that narrowly missed him. Besides her, Tsurumi was also present, wielding a bow and knocking a powerful arrow that emanated intense mana. Tsurumi fired several arrows, some of which struck Shiraishi as he desperately tried to dodge. Immediately afterward, Meguru, with an extremely swift lunge, attempted to pierce him with his sword. However, the enemy managed to deflect it, and with surprising ease, removed the arrows that had pierced him. Even after sustaining serious damage, Shiraishi's agility did not diminish in the slightest. To make matters worse, his swords possessed an insane healing ability. Meguru then realized that Shiraishi's mana was growing exponentially, awakening a hidden potential that drastically increased his magical power. Shiraishi, now free from any restrictions, would no longer be limited to using the power of duty for only 300 seconds. He declared that he would use everything he possessed, giving his utmost in combat. Activating the power of duty, Shiraishi launched a colossal fireball, aiming to turn Meguru to ashes. However, the hero found the attack monotonous and dodged it without the slightest difficulty.